see your hand. Jordan Klein, I can't. Adam knows. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive, presented by Jock Market. I'm Eric Lindquist, coming right off of a show here with Greg Ehrenberg. I came off a show this morning with Lofty and with Makachevsky. Good times, but of course, my starlet, the apple of my eye. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Adam Scherer at Ship My Money DFS. He's pretty enjoyable to follow over there. I suggest you do it. Adam, how you doing, my dude?
Doing pretty well. Nice to have a game with 10 games, like kind of a perfect size. No real weather concerns, assuming that the Cubs game doesn't get canceled because of wind or something. So it seems like a pretty fun slate to talk about.
Yeah, this is kind of a fascinating slate. I mean, you said it right off the get-go. We've got a game with a hurricane blowing in from left field, so that should be enjoyable to break down. But as you're all getting in here, we've got 117. I'm sure that'll be north of 200 by the time we get going here. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. All of that goes a long ways to allow us to do this content in front of the paywall, to give you free access to Adam, to myself, every single day of the week. I love breaking down MLB slates with you. What's so funny over there?
I'm actually going to play FanDuel tournaments tonight. And
shit. What?
I was building my dummy lineup. To go ahead and register what I was going to play.
Yeah.
And normally, I click the tournament that I'm trying to enter, but we're getting ready to start the show. So I just clicked the first thing I saw, built it, entered, and then realized I'd entered the 2K and was like, oh, I hope it's not about the fill, but I was able to get out.
Okay. That would have been a fantastic re-immersion back to the blue site. If anybody doesn't watch these shows regularly, which I don't know why you wouldn't do that, Adam doesn't play FanDuel. So this is a historic day, September 22nd. We now have the Minnesota GM fired. Thank you, God. Everything is good in my life. Adam is joining FanDuel. I think everything's wrong in his life, if that's where we're resorting to. So are you okay?
Yeah. I mean, I played there last night, made a little bit of money. It was may as well, double down. Why not?
All right. Blink twice if you need help. But otherwise, we're going to get this show started. We've got Texas plus 241 at New York Yankees. 9 total runs here in this one. Taylor Hearn on one side of the mound. He's not very good. You're going to find out very quickly about that if you want to go through some numbers there. And Corey Kluber on the other side. He's kind of an intriguing option going up against Texas. He's 5th on the top 2 pitcher percentage, 14.8%. Pretty flat ownership on him. I'm sure he'll be in the pool. I'm not super enthusiastic to get to him, but I'm happy to play him today. How about yourself?
Yeah, same here. I think that there's a few pitchers on the slate that I think you have, or that I think have, kind of question marks about them that are hard to quantify. And Kluber is one of them, since he's only thrown about 107 innings since the 2018 season, but he has had solid strikeout numbers this year, up around 25.5%. The walk percentage is too high at nearly 11%, 4.35 xFIP, but he is getting one of the best matchups that you can get. The Rangers are tied with Miami for the lowest WRC plus in baseball this season. And the salary, I think, is pretty reasonable at $9K on DraftKings. One thing that does make me feel a little bit better about Kluber as well is that in his most recent outing, he went 6 innings, he threw 95 pitches. So it suggests to me that we can start treating him like a fully stretched out starting pitcher again. He had been limited in his first couple of starts back from injury. And then the Yankees are also a team right now. ESPN has them with a 38% chance of making the postseason. So they're one of the teams where I think we can kind of trust them not to play games with their starting pitching. There's going to be a lot of teams from this point through the end of the season where you kind of, not that you're going to necessarily assume that their pitchers have a shorter leash, but that you're not going to be surprised if they take their starting pitcher out an inning before you would like from a DFS standpoint. I don't think we have that concern with Kluber. If he's pitching well, I assume he's going to be able to get around the 100 pitches here because the Yankees need to win every game they can going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. What's this? Kluber threw the no-hitter against the Rangers earlier this year. Yes, he did. I don't really know how to quantify that for today, other than Texas still sucks. That's probably the best way to put it, right?
Yeah, I think somebody in chat earlier tried to make the case that he was trying extra hard because it was a revenge game since he had thrown that 1 inning for them in the past.
Yeah, he literally had Tommy John after a 1 start, I believe, last year. Whoops.
He pitched 1 inning last year.
That's incredible. Well, over on FanDuel, he's going overrepresented. I bet you don't play much of him at 8K today, do you?
I mean, he's still, he's getting 13% ownership. I haven't built lineups and haven't played tournaments there in a really long time. So it's hard for me to confidently say what I expect to happen, but kind of looking at the ownership above him, I assume that I end up either around the field or a little bit below.
This is just going to be a completely new show. I'm just going to be referencing stuff and laughing, knowing how much You don't enjoy there, but you like winning money. And I suppose wherever you win money is probably where you should be signed up at. That's probably why you should be playing at Jock Market too, because they allow for you to do a lot of fun stuff. We'll get to them later, but let's jump over to the Texas Bats. Do you have anything whatsoever from that side?
No, I don't. I mean, I guess if I had to, Willie Calhoun's batting sixth. He at one point was a highly regarded hitter. He's minimum salary on DraftKings at 2K. Nathaniel Lowe is actually an above average hitter batting cleanup, but he's not really cheap, and first base is pretty loaded today. So pretty tough sell for me to get to the Rangers, especially because, Kluber's pulling ownership, but it's nothing crazy. 17% on DraftKings, 13% on FanDuel. Not a spot where I'm going to be going out of my way to get to the worst offense in baseball up against him.
That's probably a good idea. And the Yankees on the other side, they are pretty good at baseball when it comes to hitting balls hard and stuff like that. Don't anybody repeat that back to me. I understand it sounded weird. 16.6% ownership share for them, 6.9% top stack potential, just like every slate for the most part, where they're going to go overrepresented. But I think you can find ways to mix and match them into lineups and get different. You talk all the time about finding some of the lower represented hitters in the lineup. I think today that'd be Higashioka, Joey Gallo in a left-on-left matchup, 4,100. He's coming in at 7%. That's kind of useful. And Brett Gardner, I hate, so I refuse to play him. What are you doing with the Yankees?
Yeah, so one thing, like you said, you can certainly go to Joey Gallo here. Hearn, not surprisingly, has been better against left-handed hitters than right-handed hitters. But the idea would be if you're stacking the Yankees, for one, you're assuming Hearn isn't in the game that long because you want your stack to do well. And two, Joey Gallo is still a really good hitter regardless of who he's facing. So that's one way you can go. But then the other thing that I think is worth pointing out, and I know sometimes I'm not great about mentioning it when we talk about the top stack tool, value does matter, at least to some extent. Like, you're going to get, yes, the Yankees right now are projected for more ownership than they deserve if you're just looking at top stack percentage, but they also have the highest top value percentage on the slate on DraftKings. So there's going to be situations where you build a lineup that is already contrarian, and some of these Yankees bats are going to just fill in, what you need, what you have remaining. Kind of like for me yesterday, I had tons of Seager, tons of Trey Turner from the Dodgers. They were popular, but they were also really good. Seager in particular was a really good value, to where if I was stacking a team like the Cubs or the Twins that didn't get ownership, I didn't really care. I just wanted the best options to go along with them. So I ended up getting a lot of those guys. I see the same thing here with the Yankees when, Luke Voit at 3,200. Yeah, he's pulling 26% ownership. So you probably don't want to include him in lineups where you're also stacking a popular team with popular pitching. But if you've already gotten that taken care of, I think he's pretty clearly one of the best first base plays on the slate at 3,200 going up against Hearn. Same can be said for guys like LeMahieu and Stanton. So clearly, like the Yankees, just pay attention to what you're doing with the rest of your lineup.
Anything else from this game?
Nope.
Cool. We're going to move it along. We've got Baltimore plus 279 at Philadelphia, 8.5 total runs in this one. I got to say, the weather looks very favorable, 76 degrees, winds blowing out to left. What doesn't look favorable for Baltimore is Zach Wheeler is on the mound. Talk to me about what you're doing with the most popular pitcher on the slate.
I expect to just get a lot of him. This is a slate. I mean, there are a couple of pivots in his price range that we'll talk about. I don't think they're nearly as good for on the slate. They don't project nearly as well, but there are a couple of guys that are at least good pitchers at low ownership around him, specifically Luis Garcia and Walker Buehler. But I think pretty clearly the best pitcher on the slate, because he checks all of the boxes here. Philadelphia needs to win games, so we shouldn't really expect them to mess around with Zach Wheeler's how far into this game he goes. He's averaging just shy of 7 innings per game this season. In 30 starts, he's thrown a little over 200 innings. So like when you compare him, for example, to Luis Garcia's made 4 fewer starts than Wheeler. He's thrown 62 less innings. So you're just getting a pitcher that if he's pitching well, they're going to let him go deep into this game. The Orioles only have a 3 implied run total. Their active roster against right-handed pitching this year has about a 25% strikeout percentage, 91 WRC plus. They lose the designated hitter here in Philadelphia. It's just a really, really good spot for Wheeler. He has a lot of ownership. So if you're stacking a popular team, maybe pay attention to that and go ahead and roll the dice on someone like Garcia or Buehler. But outside of considerations like that, I think Wheeler's pretty clearly the number one guy here.
Hey, considerations. Keegan Aiken has a 6.93 ERA and a 1.61 whip. He's $5,400 and he's stretched out. Any interest?
No.
Cool. Okay. Really. Good talk. Good talk.
Yeah, I mean,
we're going to talk. Go ahead.
What'd you say?
I was just going to move along. I was waiting for a one-word answer, and I was just going to zip right over top of you. It was like
I was about to just start talking about the Phillies.
Yeah, cool. Let's talk about the Phillies. Do that and save us all time.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the best Philadelphia lineup that they're running out there, I guess, but still a 5.5 implied run total here. You have plenty of right-handed power. plus Bryce Harper. Herrera is okay at the top as well. But, I think individually, Segura, Real Muto, clearly one of the top catcher options. McCutchen, 3,800 on DraftKings, still a very, very good price tag there. So the middle of that order combined with, those guys combined with Harper look pretty good. Then it drops off a little bit when you get Galvis and Gregorius. Verling's been hitting the ball really hard since he came up. Not sure what to expect of him, going forward as a hitter, but he's still cheap. But I think the priorities here are still the middle of the lineup, Segura through McCutchen.
Yeah, I agree. And favorite bat, if I make you pick one from Baltimore, fire one up.
Mullins.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, 4.3K, Zach Wheeler, I don't want to pick on, but I got to say that wind blowing out, it's not that it's concerning, but it's definitely not ideal for a super chalky Zach Wheeler, right?
Yeah, like I would rather it not be doing that.
Yeah, me too. And it's still going to be something where I'm probably going to get to like just about no Baltimore bats, but anything else from this game for you?
Someone said Wheeler hasn't been going that deep lately. He went 5 innings in his last start. Other than that, 6 2/3, 6, 8, 6 2/3, 6, 9. Yeah,
and Philadelphia needs to win games.
Right. Last start, he only went 5 innings. He also threw 93 pitches.
Yeah, so we're in the time of the year where you got to just kind of know what everybody's playing for. Philadelphia is playing for absolutely everything. So they need to keep winning games here. St. Louis is absolutely on fire. The NL East is whatever. But yeah, this wild card race is still going to be a thing. And you need to kind of consider that here with Zach Wheeler for sure. But he's going to be pitching a long time, as long as he humanly possibly can here. I can't imagine they want any other pitcher out on the mound here in this spot. Anything else from this game?
Nope.
Cool. Let's talk for one quick second about Awesemo Plus tools and content. That's what we're here promoting, because that is what we do here. We are the premium tools behind the site. We don't really, like Adam, myself, like we've been playing DFS for a long time, but there's a reason that we found ourselves here. And it's because the premium tools and content just do so much of the work for us every single day. And it's just $29.95 for a weekly pass for every single sport: NFL, MLB, NBA when that starts back up. We've got MMA, we've got PGA, we've got so many things behind the paywall. I think you want to be checking them all out. Player projections, ownership projections, premium Slack channel, which is super lit, premium sports betting, what up, lineup builder, and so much more. And if you're using Awesemo Plus Platinum, use the promo code here, MLB Deeper Dive, all caps, one word. That's MLB Deeper Dive for 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Use the promo code that we have in the description box of this video below, and the MLB packages for as low as $4.95 weekly. Stop guessing, start winning. Check out Awesemo Plus. I promise you will not be disappointed. All right, we got number 3 here. New York Mets plus 154 at Boston, 9.5 total runs in this one. Taiwan Walker, he's now underneath 7K, which this is probably the first time I can ever remember saying this. I have interest in Taiwan Walker underneath 7K. Do you feel the same way?
Yes, on this particular slate. I don't think it's a good spot. I don't have any sort of confidence that Taiwan Walker pitches well, but I'm interested especially if you're playing 150 lineups on DraftKings. He's not someone that I would anticipate using in 3 max or something like that. But when you look at where this is kind of similar to yesterday, where there's just not anyone that's cheap that really gives you any sense of confidence. If you're going to have 23% of the field paying $7,500 for Kyle Hendricks, another 17% rostering Cole Irvin, both of these guys with like sub 17% strikeout percentages, I think at the very least, Walker is a viable pivot away from them, where basically you're just hoping that he somehow has a good game against Boston. He has a better strikeout percentage than those guys by a pretty wide margin at 22.5% this year. He's not a great pitcher, only about a 4.5 xFIP. He's allowed 1.5 home runs per 9. The most likely outcome here is he pitches poorly and the Red Sox do well. But when you have that much ownership going to guys like Hendricks and Irvin, it tells me that there probably is some utility in using cheap starting pitching, because there are so many bats on this slate. So that would be the case for Walker, is just that he's a better strikeout pitcher than the popular, inexpensive guys. He's in a brutal matchup. He's unlikely to do well, but playing tournaments isn't all about what's most likely to happen. It's about putting yourself in a position to get paid when relatively unlikely things do occur.
Absolutely agree. Dude, chat is lit today. It's kind of like sneaky lit, because it's not like a lot of things being commented at once, but it's a lot of other things. Also, our Slack is lit, so go us. Good times had by all. Let's see. What else do we have here? We've got Boston. Chris Sale seems like an important talking point here on this slate. 9,600 for him. his ownership is flat. And I can't remember how many slates you'll ever get Chris Sale, where he's not like one of the chalkiest guys, but part of that has to do with the decreasing pitch count here. Only one strikeout against Baltimore. Are we just throwing that start out the window, or is there something you're actually concerned about with Chris Sale?
There's a lot that I'm concerned about with Chris Sale.
Okay.
But most of it has to do with the Red Sox, more so than Chris Sale. Like I really, me and Josh spent a while on this morning because there's a lot of things that I think need to be considered, but I don't really have a good answer to any of the questions that I have. One thing that I think is, at least worth mentioning is, he's made 6 starts coming back from Tommy John surgery, 1 start since he got COVID. His fastball velocity is down from, the 2018 and previous years. It's in line with what he was doing in 2019 prior to Tommy John surgery. Ideally, you kind of wanted his velocity to come back this year, but the fact the velocity is down isn't a huge concern to me because in his most recent season before Tommy John, he did strike out 35% of hitters. He had a sub-3 xFIP. He still pitched really well. So that's not a huge red flag. The bigger issue for me is I don't have a good feel for what the Red Sox want from him at this point. Mm-hmm. According to ESPN, the Red Sox have a 92% chance of making the postseason. So in theory, I think it logically makes sense that they are more interested in getting Chris Sale just in a groove going into the postseason than if he's pitching well in this game saying, oh, go out there for that one last inning and throw pitches 96 through 108, which not that those are likely to be the most effective pitches for anybody, but if that's not part of the range of outcomes, which it legitimately may not be, then it's really hard to compare him to some of these other pitchers at similar price points like Wheeler, like even Buehler in a tough matchup. If you're telling me that Chris Sale is going to get close to 20% ownership at a pretty healthy $9,600 price tag in a basically neutral matchup against the Mets, but that top tier of his range of outcomes is just not on the board because the Red Sox aren't going to let it be there, then I kind of don't like the play. Like I understand that like prime Chris Sale can score 30 fantasy points in 80 pitches, but we haven't seen this be prime Chris Sale. We're just seeing a good pitcher as opposed to the best pitcher in baseball like he was for a while. And then on top of that, I don't have the confidence that that the Red Sox will let him go, 7 innings, 103 pitches or something. So I still think he's fine. Like I'll have him out of 150 lineups. Obviously I'm not going to just like not play Chris Sale, but I am a little concerned about what the actual ceiling looks like for him. I anticipate just kind of being around the field as opposed to taking any sort of big stand on him.
Tyler, I need a side-by-side shot of Adam Scher and CJ Crone ASAP. That's what we need.
Yeah,
that's going on.
That's been a thing.
That's been a thing for a while too?
Yeah, we have the same birthday too.
What?
Yeah, same year, same day.
Have you guys ever been in the same room? Are you in Colorado currently? Do you travel around with a bus that looks like the interior of an apartment?
Yeah, I'm sitting outside Coors Field right now.
That's what I figured. Yeah, good times, good times. All right. For me, the Chris Sale start, the Baltimore start. Do you remember like 2 years ago when Boston was like, hey, Chris Sale, start pitching to contact?
Yeah. So it's actually, if you go and look at Chris Sale's average fastball velocity in previous seasons, like now he's basically doing what he was doing in 2019. If you go to every year previous, he was a full 1 to 2 miles an hour higher, except for that last season with the White Sox where it was actually lower because they were like, hey, stop striking guys out.
That's what I was kind of remembering. Yeah, maybe it was 3 years ago. It was right around that time. It was the most frustrating MLB DFS time of my life. I can tell you that much.
Was that the same season he tore the jersey up?
Yes, absolutely. Just cut it. Didn't he cut it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like a retro jersey or something.
He's a crazy
he was supposed
person.
to pitch and he was just like, I don't want to wear these. And they're like, you have to. He said, no, I don't.
He cut it. Oh, what a genius. People were like doing Edward Scissorhands at the ballpark. Man, I love trolling. And I wish the internet was a little bit more like Instagram, Twitter. I wish that was more prevalent even then. It wasn't that long ago, but it feels like it's amplified now. Either way, we're going to move ourselves along here. Mets. We got to have some kind of interest, I guess, going up against Chris Sale with a 4.2 implied run total. And I don't know. I don't feel like picking on him, but considering there's relatively little ownership going on here, I mean, do you have any New York Mets interest? Currently one of the higher leverage teams in the top stacks tool.
Not really. Obviously Alonso, Baez are fine. The only thing that stands out to me though is JD Davis once again batting 5th at 2,400. I don't really know why he doesn't play more for the Mets. I don't know why he's as cheap as he is. Like he's actually a good hitter. I'm not going out of my way to target Chris Sale because even though the strikeouts, have been down and the velocity is down, he's still pitching well. He has a 3.57 xFIP. He's not walking guys. I think at the very least, Chris Sale continues to be a good pitcher going forward, if not great. So I'm not trying to go out of my way to target against him, but I do really like the price tag on JD Davis.
All right, that's fair. JD Davis, 2,100, wasn't he? What is he today? He's I don't see 2.4K. Oh, they give him the $300 bump. That'll scare everybody away for sure. All right, Boston on the other side here. This is more of our talking point from a bats perspective, obviously. Coming in with a little bit over ownership, I don't really care. It's a very high upside offense here with a 5.5 implied run total. I'm going to play more than the field of Taiwan Walker. I'm probably going to play more than the field of the Red Sox. How about yourself?
Probably both there for me. Boston not getting a ton of ownership, and that makes sense because you have the Coors game, you have the Braves, you have Houston, like all those teams are going to get ownership. The Yankees are going to get it. There's only so much that can go around. So I do like getting to Boston. They're a little bit more expensive than some of the other spots, but they're in Fenway, 5.5 implied run total. We know Walker's been struggling lately. So yeah, I like that. And then, again, with Walker, I don't expect to get crazy amounts, but still, if he's not going to get any ownership compared to guys like Hendricks, I think that's fine. There was like a little bit more commentary in chat too about whether, the Red Sox actual chances of making the playoffs and what the reasons are for why Sale might not go deep. The point here is it doesn't matter. There's a lot of questions here about, whether you think the Red Sox believe they have a 92% chance or not, doesn't matter. Whether you think they're pulling Sale early because they don't want him to go the third time through the order, like they're treating him like he's not a good pitcher, doesn't matter. Whatever the reason is, like, you can't point to a start yet where both things have happened, where Sale goes more than 6 innings and, throws 95 pitches. Like, it's just a really confusing thing because if you look at his starts, he has reached, I think he got 95 pitches once. I know he had 89 in another one. So on the one hand, you could look at it and say, well, we just haven't seen a start yet where Sale is actually efficient. And that's the only reason he hasn't gone 7 innings. But on the other hand, we've seen him pulled, 5 innings, 79 pitches often enough, or something along those lines, where I don't have any confidence that it's actually on the table. So whatever the reason is, it could be a combination. It's most likely a combination of all of them. It just speaks back to the point where there's a lot of questions about what Chris Sale's ceiling actually looks like here.
Well, you're also always referencing how, us talking about DVOA when it comes to NFL projections, it's baked into the projections. I think a lot of those risks are baked into the ownership on Chris Sale today. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if we had a better idea of exactly what Chris Sale was at this point and what the Red Sox were going to do with him, I think he would be getting more ownership. The only reason I even harp on the question so much, because like you said, a lot of like stuff is baked into projections and ownership. The only reason I harp on the sort of how deep can he go issue is that is one thing that I do try and pay attention to with pitching, is not like teams that aren't necessarily going to treat their pitchers the same as some other teams would. So like sometimes you'll get into a situation where a pitcher projects for 18 points because he has concerns about his velocity or whatever, but he's still not necessarily equal to another pitcher that projects for 18 points, because if we know that the second pitcher, when he's pitching well, is going to be allowed to throw 105 pitches, but there's still a chance that the other pitcher is only going to be allowed to throw 90, like there's still a difference in the ceiling. So that is one thing I kind of try and just keep in mind when I'm looking at pitchers. Again, so I'm not going to just avoid Sale, but I do think I am just a little bit concerned about going drastically over the field because I'm not confident how deep he goes into the game.
Hey, this is the deeper dive. You get to talk about everything as in depth as you want. That's what the people want. That's what I want. As a MLB DFS player, we want to dig in depth into some of this discussion stuff. So that's going to be more long-term serviceable for you than us just saying, hey, play these guys. I think that should be long-term what you need. Let's just finish this game out. Anything else from it total whatsoever?
No.
Okay, cool. That was great. You had to think about it. That freaks me out a little bit. But hey, let's think about this one, because this is a fun game to talk about. Minnesota Twins. Okay, Minnesota -120 at Chicago, 7 total runs in this one. Why is it a 7 total with Joe Ryan and Kyle Hendricks on the mound? There's a hurricane blowing in 21 miles per hour with up to 30 mile per hour gusts coming from left field in Wrigley Field. Oh boy, it's cold, it's windy, and we've got Joe Ryan, who I did not expect to see be the top 2 pitcher, the second most likely pitcher to finish up there. And I understand the guy in his 2 starts in AAA with Minnesota since he came over from the AAA on the Rays, 17 Ks per 9. That's a ridiculous number to look at. Only 7.401 here in his 3 games that he's played at the big league level. But still, I like Joe Ryan today. How about yourself?
Yeah, so do I. I mean, the only thing that concerns me here is that he is projected for 39% ownership on DraftKings. It is like when I look at Wheeler at 52% and I look at Ryan at 39%, I'm more inclined to, if I'm going to end up not getting to one as frequently as the field, I'm more inclined for it to be Ryan just because there's clearly less of a track record there. But all of that being said, I think he is the clear SP2. Like if you're playing cash, I think $8,200 Joe Ryan's the guy. On FanDuel, he's the second highest owned pitcher as well. I think that's fine. It's a pitcher that tore up AAA this year, struck out most of the year was in the Rays minor league system, struck out like 35% of hitters, made 2 starts at AAA for the Twins, struck out 50%. He's striking out 23% through 3 starts in the majors, but he's also thrown 17 innings over those 3 starts, which is good to see. The Cubs have the highest strikeout percentage in baseball since the trade deadline. They've been an average team in terms of production. Their power numbers are actually pretty good. They have a 100 WRC plus, but those risks are mitigated if you're not physically going to be able to hit a home run to left field, which is possibly the case here. So I think it is supposed to be blowing in from left, which is a little bit different than blowing in from center, but still it's overall going to mitigate power. The Cubs only have 2 left-handed bats in their lineup. So you're talking mostly about right-handed hitters here that pulled fly balls are just going to die. So, certainly not a lock that happens, but that's a lot of wind blowing in a field where it really matters.
I might be having to head over to the old player props tool and see if there aren't some advantageous plays from the home run perspective. I've got some strikeout props here coming up a little bit later, but the MLB player props tool, it's completely free every single day. Check that out. Home runs, doesn't look like there's anything crazy advantageous there with this win, but just logically, I'm thinking if they end up playing this game and it's as insane as what it sounds like it is there, again, up to 30-mile-an-hour wind. I played golf in the Midwest. I know when you get to that kind of level of wind, stupid stuff happens on a golf course. Stupid stuff is going to happen in this baseball game.
Yeah, I don't golf a lot, but I do remember going once when I went a lot in St. Louis, but one time in particular, it was the windiest it's ever been when I've played golf, and just like hitting on a par 3 and thinking I was like playing the wind, and then it's still just blowing all the way into like the tee box, like on the next hole.
It's not an enjoyable experience. I always liked playing in the wind because I always felt like, I just had experience growing up in South Dakota with it. I always felt like I had a leg up on the field, and I felt like it took a lot of bad players who could just get hot one day and takes them completely out of the field because they're miserable the whole time. And I generally had a good attitude about it. But nobody gives a shit about my golf. Let's talk Kyle Hendricks, 32.6% hard hit percentage. That's good. Literally just about everything else about him, bad. 441 expected slugging, only a 16.6% K percentage, but crazy wind and somebody that's 7,500, going a little bit over but I'm still willing to get to a little bit, especially considering these conditions. What are you doing with him?
Yeah, I mean, he's fine given the conditions. You can't ignore that the Twins have a 3.6 implied run total. The concerns and that Hendricks is relatively inexpensive on a slate where we would like to find some cheap pitching and there's not a whole lot to look at. The concerns for me is that, he still only has a 16.6% strikeout percentage this year. I don't think the wind is going to make him strike guys out at a higher rate than normal. The Twins are a pretty average lineup in terms of strikeouts. They do lose the designated hitter, but you have Arias at the top, who that's one guy that just does not strike out. Donaldson can be pretty tough to strike out. Kepler's not the easiest. So it's not, and Simmons is near impossible to strike out. So even though he can't hit overall. So it's not the best lineup for strikeouts either. I don't think it's one that's really going to give a bunch of free ones to Hendricks. I think there's certainly a decent chance that this is just one of those games where Hendricks goes 7 or 8 innings. He's efficient, strikes out 5 guys, gives you a good start, but he's also getting some ownership here and it's not like he's dirt cheap. So I think Hendricks is fine. I won't be upset if I don't have as much, if I don't have 20% of him, but I do think he projects as one of the best value options just because of the weather.
Cubs underneath a 1% top stack percentage, the Twins under a 2% top stack percentage. Normally against popular pitchers, I'd be looking at stacking up the other side. I do not feel like stacking up the other side in a game where it's almost impossible to hit a home run.
Yeah, I went to both sides of this game a bit over the field yesterday, not in any crazy numbers, but that was at least, a really, really bad pitcher in Griffin Jacks. It was a mediocre at best pitcher in Alec Mills, and the wind was blowing half as hard. That was a game where it's just like, okay, the wind could affect some stuff. This is a game where it's just like, I'm looking forward to watching this game because it's going to be absolutely absurd seeing what happens with the baseball. So like if I'm stacking teams here, I think I'm actually just hoping for like balls to get blown away from outfielders and become
That's
like
exactly
inside the
what I
park
was
home runs,
thinking. Yeah,
as
I was just
opposed to
thinking.
like,
I was
yeah,
like,
as opposed to actual.
it's gonna be like Globetrotter shit, where they're just gonna be playing that sound effect in your head, and it's just gonna be a fielder who underplays a ball by 10 feet.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like I almost feel like you're trying to get Josh Donaldson to like hit a routine fly ball to left that ends up landing in like right field, and he gets to run away like all the way around the bases as opposed to him hitting one out. So much more difficult sell for me going to the offenses here, just because I think the quality of pitching is better than yesterday. I think the wind is a much bigger issue than yesterday as well.
All right, I'm going to play 2% just cause. So there's that. Anything else from this game?
No.
It's so weird to be excited about a Twins-Cubs game with how bad these teams are. But man, I'm telling you, you're going to want to tune into that one. So long as it plays because of the wind, I don't think there is any postpone risk or anything. I think they're absolutely playing. So somebody had said that in chat. Just wanted to address that quick. Let's do one more game, then we'll talk jock market here. Cardinals, 4.3 implied runs here for them, plus 119 going up against the Milwaukee Brewers. Miles Mikolas, good pitcher once upon a time. Brett Anderson, don't know if he was ever really a good pitcher, but he's been serviceable here from time to time. Definitely the worst of the starters here from Milwaukee, but talk to me about pitching in this game.
Pretty tough to get excited about either pitcher. Neither one is very good at getting strikeouts. Anderson's been the better pitcher this year in terms of overall results. He has a 3.93 xFIP, but if you go to FanGraphs and look at tonight's probable pitchers, he is not even on the first page of starters if you sort by strikeout percentage. Oops. Only 14.9% for him. So, good at preventing runs, good at getting ground balls, but he's not really cheap here. 7,900. I guess I could see the case sort of for like just saying, okay, he's getting, what's he getting on draft? He's getting, 1% ownership 1%. On DraftKings. He's basically the same price as Hendricks, who's getting 23. I'll take those odds. I think there's just better spots that I can get to, though, as opposed to doing that. It's just really hard to see how Brett Anderson gives you a ceiling game here against a team that's difficult to strike out when he doesn't get strikeouts. It kind of just feels like one of those where it's like, yeah, maybe Brett Anderson goes out and throws a no-hitter and scores 35 fantasy points. But otherwise, I really just don't know how he puts up a score at that salary that you're going to be upset you don't have. And I definitely know how he puts one up that you'll be upset that you have.
Yeah, and he hasn't pitched in 3 weeks, so that probably doesn't help it either. 38 pitches before he ended up leaving that outing. I don't know what the pitch count is going to look like. I really don't care. I'm probably not going to get to any of him, which is sad because under 1%, I want to get to just about anybody who's stretched out if there's a question that they possibly could be, and I'm just not going to here in this spot whatsoever. Mikolas, I think you touched on that enough. We don't really need to go in depth on that. Let's talk offenses here. Both have decent enough totals, but St. Louis going a little bit underrepresented. Same thing with Milwaukee. I think you can get to a little bit of them, but I'm not like super enthralled with either spot. I want to try to find something I like in this game. Do you have anything?
I like the Brewers side better.
Okay.
Mikolas Mikolas in the major leagues, in general, has never been a good strikeout pitcher, but typically he's been okay at limiting production. He's always given up more power to lefties. This year in a limited sample, 176 expected ISO, 386 expected WOBA, but only a 12.9% strikeout percentage as well. If you go back to the 2019 season, 18.5% strikeout percentage, 350 expected WOBA, 179 expected ISO. You have 4 left-handed bats that have, at least serviceable power here in the top 5. You have Avisail Garcia batting cleanup, who has plenty of power from the right side. The only thing that is disappointing compared to this morning is Willy Adames not in the lineup. I really liked the DraftKings salary on him, but you get a cheap Jace Peterson batting 7th as consolation, I guess. So there is plenty of left-handed power in this lineup that I think could have some success against Mikolas. On the other side, I really like Tyler O'Neill individually. He's only 4,300 on DraftKings. He's facing a pitcher that does not miss bats, and we know that Tyler O'Neill just has massive power. Just seems like a spot where he's very likely to have success. So Goldschmidt, Arenado, Carlson, those guys look fine as well. But Tyler O'Neill, just sort of the guy I'm singling out from the Cardinals.
Okay. Let's move along then, because anything else from this game you want to talk about?
Nope.
Yep. Pretty boring game. Not a boring game. Anything over a chalk market. They're a really fun site to go play on. It's just like the stock exchange. We're able to buy and sell shares of players in real time for real money with guaranteed payouts at the end of the night. It's an absolute blast. They have such a clean look. For me, having the sites that just look good and make it so easy, the interface is so easy to be able to play and to figure everything out. Go over there, check out their pregame IPOs, pick up shares of your favorite players, then buy, sell, or hold them during the game based on analysis. They have everything available in all of the major sports. We're talking MLB, but they have NFL stuff as well. NBA when that comes back, NHL as well. PGA, you name it, they've got something for it. Like, absolutely love playing over there. Download the app to get started using promo code Awesemo for a $50 bonus on your first deposit. That's a premium exclusive offer for all of you in this community. Awesemo for a $50 bonus. If you're going to play over there today, one of my favorite things to do, I talk about it all the time, is go to some of these back order guys with a bunch of power. So, we have a number of games here, like later on in the night too. I know Atlanta, you see Jorge Soler, Adam Duvall. I mean, Jorge Soler now leading off here a number of times, but even a guy like Eddie Rosario, or for Houston, Kyle Tucker, those kind of guys go a little bit undervalued on Jock Market. A lot of other like teams, especially the Dodgers, pretty much everybody on that team is going to be very expensive over on Jock Market tonight. Find some power on some of these other teams in the back half of the order. Get them for a couple bucks, $3, $4. And if they hit a home run, you are in business and you have a viable chance at finishing in that top spot, which is $25 per share. It's such an easy game type, such an easy gameplay. Check it out. Thank you so much to Jock Market for their sponsorship. It's a blast to play over there. And promo code Awesemo gets you that $50. That's how you build and sustain a bankroll in this industry. All right, we got 5 games. We're going to rapid fire. We've got the Dodgers. This is a major talking point, obviously. Now the implied total is up to 6.5 here, 4.6 for the Colorado Rockies, but minus 195 favorites. We got Walker Buehler on the mound, German Marquez. These are 2 really good pitchers, but this is still the highest total game here on the slate. I mean, something doesn't completely add up for me here. I know it's Coors Field, but what are you doing with pitchers? Because it feels like a tread lightly spot.
Yeah, it's also a really interesting one in tournaments, though, just based on the ownership and talent. Buehler at 9,800, obviously it's a really difficult matchup going into Coors Field. We know the Rockies strike out much less at home. They have a 19.5% strikeout percentage at home this season. Their WOBA in Coors Field is 348. Outside of Coors, they have like a 280 WOBA and a 25% strikeout percentage. Just night and day difference for this team. And it makes sense because, for one, the pitches move less in Coors Field, so strikeouts go down. And then the outfield is massive, so balls that typically would be caught elsewhere end up falling in for hits here. So it's a really tough place to pitch. But all of that being said, Walker Buehler is really good. He's averaging almost the same number of innings pitched per start as Wheeler is. They've made the same number of starts this year. He's thrown 8 fewer innings. So he does give you that upside where if he's pitching well, he's going to go give you, a bunch of innings. He has struck out 25.8% of hitters this year, which is the 3rd highest on the slate. He's a really good pitcher getting no ownership while Zach Wheeler pulls 50%. I think Zach Wheeler is very clearly the better play. I don't think there's any question about that. But if you're going to a popular team where, you have the Yankees plus, I don't know, the Phillies or something like that.
Yeah.
Buehler still gives you, he's not going to hit his ceiling nearly as often as Zach Wheeler is in their respective spots, but he still gives you that high ceiling where he can go give you 7, 8 innings, strike out, 9 guys. Still certainly a possibility for somebody like Buehler. So I think he fits in where you need to save ownership at pitcher. If you don't need to save ownership, I think Wheeler, I think the gap between the two in their respective matchups is big enough where I'd be fine eating Wheeler's ownership. And it's kind of the same thing for me on German Marquez here. I do think that there are several people in his price range that I think project a little bit better because they're not facing the Dodgers in Coors. So that'll probably make it even more difficult to get to Marquez than to Buehler. But the same logic applies. He projects 3 points worse than Kyle Hendricks using Alex's projections. Hendricks is clearly the guy that you're going to go to if you're not worried about ownership in that lineup. But German Marquez is a good pitcher. Even though he's unlikely to have success here, he's still going to have success often enough, combined with Hendricks struggling often enough to where, if someone were to just walk up and give you 22-1 odds and you get Marquez and they get Hendricks, you would take that every single time. So I think it's a spot you can move to. I don't necessarily think it's the best spot. I don't anticipate getting a lot of Marquez. I would think I probably get to Buehler first, but I think both of these pitchers are pretty similar in that, in the way that they're viewed in the context of the slate.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear Greg Ehrenberg talk about him too. He rosters a bunch of pitchers at Coors Field. He always has, it seems like. So, or at least this season. I don't want to speak to his history of it, but definitely 2 good pitchers. I mean, German Marquez got lit up to Washington. I don't really care. I'm willing to take a couple shots in large field stuff. 2% gets you gigantically over the field on him. And if you have a chalky lineup you want to play, be it the Houston Astros, basically. I'm pretty much going to only play him in Houston Astros stacks. I'll just throw it out there. German Marquez, not the worst way to go about it. All right, the Dodgers, this is a massive talking point as well. 18.4% top stack percentage, 17.2% ownership share. So there is positive leverage going to the Dodgers today. Yesterday was some of the most uninspiring first 4 innings of baseball I've ever seen in my life out of them. 6 total pitches for Senzatella, but Senzatella kind of gets in those. I mean, he pitches to contact, obviously, but he keeps the ball on the ground, and Dodgers just didn't do anything early on him. And you knew that stack was pretty dead early on, but I still really like getting back to the Dodgers today. How about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of torn here because on the one hand, they're expensive. And kind of, I guess on the same hand, Marquez, I think, is a pretty good pitcher, but they're not really getting much more ownership than other teams on this slate, especially when you look individually. Like on DraftKings, Corey Seager is getting 29%. He's 4,300 at shortstop, hitting second on a team with a 6.5 implied run total. So, yeah, no kidding. He's getting a lot of ownership. But beyond that, you have Turner at 23%, at a weak position, but then everyone else is sub 20%. So it's pretty comparable ownership to a lot of other teams. And even though Marquez is a good pitcher, you still have the highest implied run total on the slate by like a full run for the Dodgers. So I don't love the matchup. I don't love the pricing. I think that is probably likely to be the biggest issue is when you if you're trying to full stack the good Dodgers, it's going to force you onto like Hendricks plus, Ryan with kind of mediocre one-offs or something. Mm-hmm. But you also get value at the bottom of this order with a $2,800 Gavin Lux, $2,300 Luke Raley. So that can help you, sort of offset that as well. I like getting to the Dodgers because I don't think the ownership is really that concerning. I don't love the matchup, but, again, it kind of just comes back to I'm not going to try and guess exactly how this game plays out. It's more so over the course of a season, if I get a team with a 6.5 implied run total in Coors Field that is being rostered at the same frequency as several other teams, I think I'm just going to make money by playing them.
I'm right there with you. And yesterday I had like 28% Lucas Raley because he got added late. He was like 3.5% in everything yesterday. I just thought it was like one of the sharper. I was like, oh, game theory. There we go. And then the announcer started saying that he had like 5 homers in his last 7 games in AAA. And I was like, there's no way this cat's going to do anything today. He actually had one of the key hits in the game, but I digress. For those who don't think I watch baseball, I watched that entire game front to back. It was good times. And then it was not good times seeing San Francisco win. We'll get to them here in a second. On the other side, Colorado, Walker Buehler, fantastic pitcher. We've seen fantastic pitchers get blown up in Coors Field. What are you doing with the Rockies?
Probably not much. Like Buehler's not getting ownership. There's not much I really want from Colorado. Like it's nice that you get Tapia at 3,600 leading off. Blackman's reasonably priced. The team as a whole isn't that expensive, but I also just have a ton of respect for Buehler. I think there's a lot of spots I like a little bit more on this slate.
All right, let's move ourselves along then. We've got Houston minus 198 at Los Angeles Angels, 9.5 total at the Halo. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Luis Garcia. There we go. Jansen Junk. I don't even know what to say about that name. Every time I see it, it makes me laugh. I know it makes me a child, but I don't really give a shit. It's so funny. Jansen Junk is not very good at pitching, and we're seeing that reflected. We don't even need to talk about him, but let's talk about Luis Garcia, third on the top 2 pitcher percentage here, coming in with by far the least amount of ownership of those top 5. You referenced Walker Buehler. In one lineup, who would you rather play, Garcia or Buehler?
I think that's really close, and I lean Garcia, but I think Buehler has the higher ceiling. Okay. I think Garcia just looks a little bit better given the matchup, but Garcia for sure has question marks about how deep he's going to go into the game. He hasn't thrown more than 90 pitches in any of his last 10 starts. So that's, a bit of a problem when you're paying $10K for somebody. Like if you're the thing that makes me sort of hesitate on Garcia is with Buehler. I think even though it's unlikely, given his matchup in the park, Zach Wheeler can go have a good game and Buehler can just beat him. Yeah. I think Wheeler has to have basically a mediocre game for Garcia to beat him, because if Wheeler's pitching well, he's probably giving you he's averaging more than an extra inning per game compared to Garcia this year. So if they're both pitching well, I think it's just really difficult for Garcia to catch Wheeler. And that's kind of the concern for me, but still it is a really good matchup. We know the Angels strike out a lot. Garcia does have the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 27%. And I will mention on FanDuel is 8,300. So you're getting a $1,700 discount there. Not particularly popular there either. So I like the spot. It's tough for me to get too much of him at the expense of Wheeler, because I don't really think there's a world where they both pitch well and pitch the same number of innings.
All right. Going over to Chance and Junk. I mean, these Houston Astros here, it's just it's ridiculous. 17.2% ownership share. They are the second most likely team to break the slate here in this spot. We see value that exists in this lineup. We see power that exists in this lineup. We don't have it yet. We'll see Jake Myers or Siri or McCormick or some combination of value that's going to be on the back half of this lineup. Martin Maldonado used to play here. And then, of course, he had a home run last night. I mean, I don't really ever like playing him as a catcher option, but he's cheap as well. This stack is almost just too easy to put together. How are you handling Houston on this slate?
Yeah, I mean, they're getting quite a bit of ownership now, but I think there's a good chance. I'm pulling up now. I'm assuming a lot of that's just going to be the cheap guys in this lineup. That's kind of the entire lineup. So that'll kind of deter me a little bit. Like, they're getting, as a team, they're basically getting the same ownership as the Dodgers, and the pricing is certainly more favorable, and it's a good spot, but it's still not, the Dodgers in Coors Field. So I had tons of Houston last night. I think the way things look right now, I probably get to a little bit less than of them, but that's just from an ownership standpoint. I still really like the spot. Junk's a pitcher who has, prior to this year, had thrown like 2 innings above AAA. He put up fine, but not great numbers at AA this year as like a 26-year-old. So that's typically not indicative of someone that's going to have major league success at any point in the near future. So it's a very, very good spot for Houston. Right now, though, the ownership does scare me away a little bit when you compare them to teams like Atlanta and the Dodgers.
Right. And then Angels, do you have anything whatsoever on the other side?
Brandon Marsh is 2,200 if he's leading off. Shohei Ohtani is really, really good at hitting baseballs. And Jared Walsh is cheap. But
amazing analysis. I thought that was perfect. I think that's all we really needed. Atlanta -174 at Arizona, 9.5 total runs. Here in this one, we've got Ian Anderson and Merrill Kelly. Somebody in chat keeps bringing up Merrill Kelly over and over again. Was it Josh? Did Josh say something this morning about him?
Yeah, Josh thinks he's a better play than Ian Anderson or something.
Oh my. I disagree about that. I would much rather get to Ian Anderson against, I don't know, the Arizona Diamondbacks, who, if I click over to look at their splits up against right-handed pitching here for the season, oh God, they have to be at the bottom, right? They got to
79 WRC plus, if I remember correctly.
79 WRC plus. That is dead last second to last. Colorado. But that's also park adjusted. They're better than that at home. But Arizona, 24.7% K percentage. I'm going to sign up for targeting them for sure with Ian Anderson. How about you?
Yeah, I like Anderson here. He's getting, we're projecting for 1/3 the ownership of Joe Ryan. I get Joe Ryan's in a good spot. He's likely to be a good strikeout pitcher and all that. Ian Anderson's a good pitcher as well. There are some question marks. I think kind of exactly how healthy his shoulder is and, what the floor kind of looks like for him here. He's made 4 starts since coming back from his shoulder injury. Didn't strike out a single batter in the first 2. One game was in Coors, one was against the Giants. Tough matchups, but still should be striking guys out. Since then, though, 9 strikeouts in 5 innings against the Marlins, 7 strikeouts, and I think 5 2/3 against the Giants. But even in those 2 starts, he wasn't great. The Marlins game, just watching it, he kind of was like feeling his way through it and at risk of being in trouble several times. The Giants game, he gave up 3 home runs in those 5 2/3. So I'm not super confident that Ian Anderson's at 100% health. I think he very much could be healthy enough that he's not at risk of re-injuring himself, but not at 100%. But still, that's not that important when you're talking tournaments, because if he pitches poorly, whatever, that lineup doesn't win. You're thinking more about what's it look like when Ian Anderson pitches well. And this is a pitcher that prior to returning from the injury had a 24% strikeout percentage. He's got a good matchup against Arizona. And again, he's giving me like a 1/3 ownership discount off of Joe Ryan. So I think Ryan's the better play. Like in cash, I would go to Ryan, but I have no issue using Anderson in tournaments. Also, the roof is open in Arizona, so that's a little bit of a downgrade for Anderson as well.
I saw that, and that's kind of the main reason for me looking at Merrill Kelly, where I'm like, why would I even want to incur that kind of a risk? When you look at Atlanta's lineup, and I know you and I have been on multiple shows where we've just praised Atlanta for everything that they did at the deadline, because it's kind of ridiculous, the way that they've ensembled this team. Now Eddie Rosario being healthy in there too in the 6 hole, cheap add-in as well, 2.9K on DraftKings here today. But how do you handle Atlanta on this slate, considering, I think that they were pretty chalky the other day. Now it's pretty flat ownership on them. Makes me feel like they'll be up there with the Dodgers as my highest owned stack today.
Yeah, the way it looks right now, I like Atlanta. Yesterday, it was kind of like I liked Houston a bit more than Atlanta because we sort of had the ownership flipped where neither team was getting crazy ownership, but Atlanta, we had projected to come in a little bit higher and, with similar chances of success. Now we have similar chances of success again. Houston slightly ahead, but a lot more ownership coming into the Astros in part because of how cheap, parts of that stack are. But you have some value with the Braves as well. You mentioned Rosario. Soler is pretty inexpensive too. Kelly's an okay pitcher, but he doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. And that's just something that really concerns me when you're going up against a team that has as much power as the Braves do. Kelly's only struck out 19.2% of hitters this year, 1.16 home runs per nine. Against lefties this season, he has a 17.3% strikeout percentage. Righties, it's at 21.2%. But just the spot where I expect the Braves to put the ball in play, the roof being open helps them. I like getting here with the ownership as it's currently projected.
Yeah, and Merrill Kelly, 6.1% barrel percentage is pretty darn good there, but everything else seems to be trending towards you should stack up this team. They could keep the line moving. And as you said, environment matters big time here. Having the roof open in a 95-degree evening. So on the other side, Arizona over a 4 implied total. I kind of mixed and matched more Arizona bats than I thought I would last night. Be it Marte, Varsho, then you had some cheapies out there. We had Pavin Smith that was in the lineup, not in the lineup today. Did you do that as well?
Yeah, had a decent amount of Varsho, some Van Meter batting fifth.
Yeah, it was so weird. Yeah, Van Meter, I had tons of that, dude. I was just floored looking at my lineups after the fact. I wish I had referenced more of them, pivoted on to more of them too, as I needed to pivot off some lineups that were just not looking that good. But talk to me about Arizona.
Nothing that stands out to me really, other than, kind of like I mentioned when we were talking about Anderson as a pitching option. I do think that there's a non-zero chance that he's just not at 100% right now. And that would make, Arizona's chances of blowing up here a little bit higher than you would assume with a 4.1 implied run total. But overall, nothing that really stands out. Cole Calhoun batting cleanup at 2,700, I do think looks good. Varsho, batting third as a catcher, but he's pretty expensive. So, somebody you can use in tournaments, but not going to stand out as a top option. I don't hate getting to Arizona in small bits in tournaments. Like if you have, if you're going to the Braves, or you're going to the Astros, you're going to the Yankees, somebody like that, you can balance that out with Arizona, who's projected for basically no ownership here. And it wouldn't be surprising if they, get a couple home runs off of Anderson or something like that. But in terms of full stacks and really prioritizing them as far as like one of my highest owned teams, I'd be pretty surprised if I get to a lot of them.
All right. Yeah. Anytime you can just roster a team that's won under 50 games, you just got to do it for sure. That's the way that I feel about that. Seattle plus 128 at Oakland, 8.5. We got 2 games to go. We should be able to round this puppy out. We've got Chris Flexen on the mound on one side, Cole Irvin on the other. Both suck at pitching, but good game environment. And for them, looking at Oakland, 60 degrees, relatively no wind. Are we taking shots on either pitcher whatsoever?
Yeah, I think so. Irvin projected for 15.5% ownership on DraftKings. On the one hand, it's like, God, that sucks because he doesn't strike guys out. Right. He's got a 4.8 xFIP this year with a 15.9% strikeout percentage, but he's $5,800. He's one of the cheapest pitchers that is remotely viable here. He might actually be the cheapest pitcher that's remotely viable here. Pitching in Oakland, the Mariners strike out. They only have a 4 implied run total. You're not expecting Irvin to go out there and get you like 25 fantasy points, but he obviously can. It's not likely, but more so, it's just, you're going to be able to get a lot of other good things into your lineup that'll help you, increase the ceiling of your overall lineup, even if you don't have the highest upside pitcher. So I think Irvin is a good play just because of his price tag. Flexen on the other side, I would say, is a decent option because of his projected ownership. We have him projected for about 1% ownership, only a 5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. It's a matchup that sucks. The A's don't strike out. They have a lot of good hitters. I don't want to get to Flexen, but I think he's kind of comparable to like Marquez in that I don't like the matchup. I don't really want to roster him, but he's also coming in at a substantial discount to someone like Kyle Hendricks. So in lineups where, I do need to save a little bit of ownership, I think he's fine. I wouldn't anticipate getting tons of him though, because I do think there's enough other pitchers I like.
Using the player props tool, one way that I can feel good about that, he's only got a 3.5 prop line for Cole Irvin. Bet the over on that. If you're not feeling as good about his DFS ownership, I know I don't, but I'll probably have a little bit just to get to some of the bats that I really want to get to. Maybe you can get through and have a serviceable enough outing, but take the over on that 3.5. And that player props tool is free all the time. Take advantage of that. On the other side, Chris Flexen. So we're looking more at Oakland bats, I think, as a stack, but hasn't been a stack going off of late. I still don't care. I know there's going to be upside eventually here. And at 1.2% ownership share, I bet I get to 5-6% tonight. How about yourself?
I almost always do. I won't be upset. Like if I don't get to them here, I won't really care that much because Flexen does do a pretty good job of mitigating hard contact. The park itself is really difficult to hit in. It's only supposed to be like 60 degrees. But typically I just get to, some Chapman and Olsen and Marte. I do think it's worth pointing out Jed Lowry on DraftKings is $2,900.
That's useful. $2,900 for a guy who's been cleanup. I guess he'll be batting fifth now that Matt Chapman is back to planet Earth. After not being with us for the first half of the season. That was good times. Thanks, Matt Chapman. But anyway, anything else from this game for you?
Nope.
All right, cool. We got one more to go. I just want to talk briefly about OddsShopper. It's the best place to go shop for your lines. Right now, it's all looking like NFL here at the moment. So go check out all of the NFL stuff for OddsShopper. And for today, free tools, MLB player projections. Another great way to just look at what's behind the paywall, take advantage of those free opportunities whenever they show up. We try to give you a little bit here, but sign up for that weekly package. I'm telling you right now, $29.95 for every single sport. If you're here grinding, if you're putting in the work, if you're watching all the videos, and we have so many videos out for fantasy football, this is the best time to get in and start investing in it now. Because, when these offers start going away, MLB Deeper Dive, all caps, one word, 25% off of that right now. When those opportunities go away, it's just a little bit more expensive. And, the NFL season, as people start accumulating more data, just a little bit harder to win here and there. So I'm telling you, get in there now and try it out. I know you won't be disappointed. All right, we got one more game to cover here. We've got San Francisco Giants plus 102 at San Diego, 9.5 total runs in this one. Scott Kazmir, Vince Velasquez. Haven't seen that name a ton in my life here, but good ballpark to be pitching in. But nearly 5 total runs here for both teams. Oh boy, are we trying anything tricky here with pitchers?
If I did, it would be Kazmir, just because he's 5,900. He is fully stretched out based on what we've seen him do in the minor leagues lately. At AAA this year for San Francisco, he made 12 starts, 13 appearances, 52 and 2/3 innings. He struck out 22% of hitters, also had a 5.25 xFIP. I don't want to roster Kazmir here. I just think he's kind of in that mix where it's like, if people are going to play Cole Irvin and you need a lower owned guy in that price range, Kazmir probably doesn't deserve, 15-1 odds, but very, very unlikely he's good. Pretty tough matchup against the Padres. Not a whole lot else to say there. And as far as Velasquez goes, brutal matchup against the Giants. He's been just flat out bad this year. 22% strikeout percentage, but a 5.05 xFIP, 2.13 home runs per 9, 10.5% walk percentage. Park upgrade for the Giants as well. Really, really tough sell on Velasquez.
110 WRC plus against right-handed pitching for the Giants. 202 ISO. Major league leading 202 ISO against right-handed pitching. I mean, I find that to just be ridiculous what they're doing this entire season. It's blown my mind, but you know what? They're probably your most leveraged team that you can possibly get to on this slate. 5.4. I mean, under 1% ownership share, I find that hard to believe, but 6% top stack percentage. I know they won't be more popular than Houston. I know they won't be more popular than the Yankees, and I know they won't be more popular for sure than the Dodgers. How do we handle San Francisco on this slate?
I would like to get to them, but I really don't know how. They are so expensive on DraftKings.
But that's why you do go to them, right?
I mean, yes,
nobody else can do it.
Yes and no, because at the same time, you do at some point have to paying up for them to be contrarian is nice, because if they go off, and they certainly could in the spot, you're going to kind of be by yourself. But on the other hand, I think you're sacrificing a lot on this slate. There's not much cheap pitching. So if you go to the Giants at these prices, as a stack, they're more expensive than the Dodgers because they don't have Lux and they don't have Raley. So whereas you can stack the Dodgers and still get Zach Wheeler plus, probably plus Ryan if you use both Raley and Lux. If you go to the Giants, you're either just using complete bottom of the barrel hitters, or you're really going to be relying on, the Cole Irvins of the world. So the fact that it's not so much that they're expensive as it is that other teams have so much value. The Astros are cheap enough. The Yankees are cheap enough. The Dodgers, if you use the bottom of the lineup, are cheap enough where you can get good pitching and good one-offs with them. I think it's going to be really tough to get to the Giants just because of what you're going to have to sacrifice elsewhere in your lineup. That being said, if I get to them, I'm more than happy because it means that I made good enough lineups and was able to fit them in. And I do really like the ceiling for them. They are a very, very good offense. They get a park upgrade. They're facing a really bad pitcher. All that's great. think it's going to be really tough to actually get them into lineups.
All right, that's fair. Well, I want to talk about expensive. Fernando Tatis leading off again, 6.3K. Manny Machado, 5.7K. Everybody else pretty manageable on the San Diego team, but not super enthralled, even at flat ownership. I'll probably get to more of those two guys, but probably nobody else here. What do you see from San Diego?
Tatis and Machado, I think the priorities. Cronenworth deserves a mention, even though it's lefty-lefty. He's hitting second on DraftKings at 3,600. Tommy Pham batting cleanup, I think, is a pretty solid option. So the Padres are going to be easier to get to. Again, I assume Kazmir is not going to be any good in the major leagues. He hasn't pitched outside of a few appearances this year since, I think, 2016. So I do like the Padres here. I think they're a little bit more favorably priced. I'm fine with getting to them. We have them basically owned right where they should be. 4% chance of being top stack, 4% ownership. So I like San Diego, not standing out as like a top team for me, but someone that I would expect to, at least be getting around the field on.
All right, Adam, we did it. We got through everything. 10 games. That's your MLB deeper dive. Any final words for the people on the way out?
Good luck.
That was very nice of you. Good luck, everybody. We've got MLB Live Before Lock with Greg and Terry coming up right after this. So don't go anywhere. Hang tight. They'll be right there with you. And then PGA Live Before Lock, Jason and myself coming up at 7 p.m. Eastern time, right after the MLB Live Before Lock. We're going to be talking Ryder Cup. And I got to tell you, if you have not had a chance to play any DFS, well, nobody has because it hasn't been around for DFS, but I can guarantee you there are going to be some bets. There are going to be a lot of discussion about the Ryder Cup going on at Whistling Straits here starting on Friday. You will not want to miss that if you're a PGA fan, even if you're not. It's one of the best sporting events, period, that exists. He's Adam Scher. He's the man. I'm Eric Lindquist. I'm okay sometimes. We'll see you later. Awesemo MLB Live Before Lock show, sponsored by Jock Market. If you guys look at the topics bar over there, we're doing pretty much the same stuff I usually do when I host Live Before Lock. We've got pitchers, stacks we're talking about. But I also want to dedicate some time at the end to answer your guys' questions. And, as we go, we're always answering your questions, but even more so than normal. I really want to make a priority to let you guys know. Stick around to the end. Terry and I, we're going to be answering your questions, going through any kind of questions you have about pitchers, stacks, whatever it might be when we do a roundup on the slate. So stick around to the end. Also, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Terry, how are you feeling about tonight's slate?
I like it. I think it's an interesting slate. I think there's some weirdly shaped opportunities in strange spots that we might not normally consider, but I'm definitely playing some of them. So it's like to get into it and hear what you think about it. I actually have been slammed through the day, so I haven't caught up on any of our other shows. So I haven't really heard anybody else's opinion, but my own, which can sometimes be good and sometimes be really dangerous. So ready to talk it through.
Yeah, it's certainly, at least when we go to some of the pitching options here, it's something where, listen, at the top, there's a fairly clear play by the field here in Zach Wheeler, who's picking up a massive amount of ownership today. Now, the spot for him against the Baltimore Orioles is good for a number of reasons. Number one, well, Zach Wheeler himself is good also, but the Orioles, they don't have a particularly good offense. They strike out a decent clip, and this is in a National League park where they lose the benefit of a DH. So Zach Wheeler, you play him in cash games today. Not too much thought. But I know oftentimes you like to get contrarian at pitching. I find this to be a slate where it's pretty difficult to get off of some of the Zach Wheeler ownership, though. But are you managing to do, or are you riding with the chalk here, Terry?
I expect I'll be around the field on the FanDuel slate probably. If I can manage to get underneath the 25% by a little bit, I'll be happy with it. If I come in about 20%, maybe carve off a little bit to spread around. But I agree. It's kind of him and then everybody else. And on name recognition, you wouldn't necessarily think that. You see Chris Sale on the slate, you see Walker Buehler on the slate, a couple of these other guys in the mid-range, and you start thinking, all right, there's a lot of other options to spread around, but Sale's got a major question about his innings. Buehler's pitching in Colorado. It's really Zach Wheeler at the top of this board as the most likely starter to put up a very good number here. You mentioned going up against the Orioles, that team, 165 collective ISO, a 3.61% home run rate, both dead in the middle of the league, but they create runs 9% worse than average and have a 25.1% strikeout rate in the split against righties. So I think it's a good spot for Wheeler. He's been ultra consistent throughout the year, despite a few bumps and bruises with some earned run happenstance over his last handful of starts. He's been very, very consistent. And when you break that down, you look under the covers, his xFIP, the underlying numbers have all basically held up. They've increased a little bit over the second half, but nothing that really concerns me about his quality. He's among the league leaders in innings pitched, so good average depth of start. He's among the league leaders in quality start. I love the chance for him to give you a quality start, potentially a win bonus here if you need it. Just an excellent option. So happy to get to around the field with Walker Buehler, but I am interested in some of the more offbeat spots as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those pivot options where you're most likely to go. And it's going to be hard to talk me off Zach Wheeler, even despite the ownership, just because there aren't that many guys that I really feel all that great about in terms of pitching options. You mentioned some of the concerns there, but then, you look at the other chalk option today on DK. We've got Zach Wheeler in over 50% of lineups. And Joe Ryan in 42% of lineups. That really tells you about the pitching quality on the slate. And then even on FanDuel at 7,700, Joe Ryan's picking up 25.2% ownership. That is a massive number for a pitcher who, it's not to say that I think Joe Ryan's terrible or anything, but is there a slate where he's ever warranted to be, a uber chalk play? Probably not. So at least on the high end, let's talk about Zach Wheeler. And both of us agree we're going to like him. We're getting to him a lot here. But in lineups, we are looking to pivot off of Zach Wheeler. Who are the high-priced options you're most likely going to?
I think there's one that really stands out for leverage in a reasonable spot. Before we get into Walker Buehler, I think Luis Garcia is super interesting against the Angels. 22% probability of being a top two pitcher on DK, getting owned at 5%. That is a ton of leverage on this player. $10,000 salary. I get that maybe people aren't used to paying that price for him. Across town on FanDuel, he's 8,300. Third-ranked pitcher on the board. It's a lower overall probability of success because we're talking about individuals in the top slot, not the top two. But he's getting under-owned on the FanDuel slate for way, way cheaper too, which I find even more confusing. I don't really know where the slate is on this guy. He's been a pitcher that I've had success with throughout the year in DFS. In season long, he's pitched to a 27.2% strikeout rate, 3.81 xFIP on the season, 13.3% induced swinging strikes, 30% CSW. Doesn't really get killed by any means on contact, 7.1% barrel rate, 38.1% hard hit, all perfectly fine. He's a very good pitcher going up against a lineup with exactly two hitters in it. Shohei Ohtani and Jared Walsh are the only real threats in this Angels lineup. Everybody else comes in below average in my home run model. They come in largely average in terms of what they've done as an active roster throughout the course of the season. 169 ISO, slightly above the middle of the league, a 359 home run percentage right around the middle. 98 WRC plus, so 2% below average creating runs against righties, and a 25.2% strikeout rate. So there are Ks there for him. I think this is a really, really good spot, and I'm confused as to where the field is on this one.
Yeah, I agree, especially relative to the other options here. And by the way, Zach Wheeler, once again, just heading above the fields, above everybody else. So I get that everybody's going there, but I don't think that means nobody should be playing Luis Garcia, who 5% over on DK, who sure, maybe the price tag's a little inflated at 10,000, but on FanDuel at 8,300, that's a pretty reasonable price tag. And he's only picking up 6% ownership. So I really like Luis Garcia. The other guy, once again, I like a Coors Field pitcher, and it's a Dodgers pitcher at least. I'm not going to the Rocky side of the game, but Walker Buehler is a very talented pitcher. The Rockies have one of the worst offenses in baseball against right-handed pitching, and it's still a spot. Like yesterday, I was overweight to the field on Julio Urias. It looked really good for a few innings. Then he kind of fell apart towards the end, but pitching was a little sketchy last night. But for the ownership, it's hard for me to not like some of these pitchers in these spots. Walker Buehler is super talented. He's projected for 1% ownership on DK. On FanDuel, he's projected for 0.6% ownership. It doesn't take that much to get overweight to the field on him. And relative to our numbers in our top pitchers tool, 6.8% chance for Walker Buehler to the top scoring pitcher on FanDuel. On DK, 13.2% chance. It doesn't mean you go play him more than Zach Wheeler, but if you're playing 10 to 15% Walker Buehler, you're 15x the field on him, and that's a spot where I want to be for a slate that's just super chalky at pitching.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you. I wrote about Buehler in my tournament strategy article this afternoon because I thought it's a fascinating spot getting a guy like that. And I hate talking about park splits, particularly for pitching when you're talking about super small sample sizes. But with Coors Field, at times it warrants to see, all right, what has a guy done when he's pitched at Coors Field? And this is where some of the concern might come into play with Buehler. Over the course of 9 starts, a very, very small sample size from which we should not be extracting data, but to continue the point, over 9 starts, he has a 20.4% strikeout rate and a 7.5% walk rate with a 2.68% home run rate in Coors and a 1.32 whip. Over the course of his full season, 25.8% strikeout rate, 6.5% walk rate, and a 0.96 whip this year with a 2.39% home run rate. Obviously, those career Coors numbers don't really compare to the pitcher that he is this year. For his full career, 27.6% strikeout rate, 6.4% walk rate. So again, much lower strikeout rate, a higher walk rate, putting more guys on base, giving up a few more home runs, not many, 2.68 to 2.39, pretty negligible there. But we do have clear indicators that he's not the same pitcher when he's at Coors Field. We knew that coming in, and I don't care. We're talking about Walker Buehler. He's one of the best pitchers in the league, an excellent control pitcher going up against a lousy lineup, and nobody's going to be on him. That's the kind of play that we'll make again and again and again in tournaments, and we only have to be right so many times. I'm totally with you. 15% sounds about right. That's where I'm shooting to be on the FanDuel slate. If I come in a little under, a little over, I'm still comfortably ahead of the field, and that's exactly where I want to be on that play. So I'm excited that you're there as well. I think it makes a ton of sense for tournaments. I wouldn't touch it for anything where, you know, your life was on the line. It's not the greatest play in the world in terms of probability of success, but with nobody on a pitcher like Walker Buehler for what is arguably a low price, definitely makes sense to me.
By the way, Terry, if you haven't done so already, give a refresh to the top pitchers. So we've got some fresh ownership, and Zach Wheeler becoming even more popular as get closer to lock. And also on your point about Walker Buehler, it's exactly that. He's not the most likely pitcher to go out and crush today. But if you were to play Walker Buehler on every single slate that he's sub 1% owned, you're coming out ahead over time. And I feel very confident about that. So that's what really gets him into my player mix today. But Zach Wheeler, are you ready for this, Terry? Are you sitting down? I know you're sitting down, but still, that's the phrase. Zach Wheeler, refresh ownership, 57.9% on DraftKings. On FanDuel, now up to 26.3%. Not really a massive move on FanDuel. That's about where he was. DK, though, where he goes from 50% to 58%. Does that change your opinion on him at all as a tournament option? Also, I don't want to put influence your opinion too much, but it doesn't really for me. He was already going to be really popular, and it's just a little more so. But I'm ready to play him anyway.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's less comfortable for me just in the way that I like to approach tournaments. But on this specific slate, given kind of a pitching slate that just really falls off after 5 or 6 options, I think it's necessary to have just around the field and just have an overwhelming amount of Wheeler. And everybody's going to be kind of riding along in that boat. So then it becomes a matter of where you're distributing your other pitching shares and what hitting we're all getting to. The full fade is well out of the question just on ownership. The undercut is certainly in play, but how much do you want to sacrifice of a guy with that much bigger of a probability of being one of the top 2 options on the DK slate? I think you can maybe get away with it a little bit more on FanDuel, where he's got to be the stone cold nuts, but he's not quite as owned out, out to that crazy, 50% range on that site. So it's definitely in play for me. I think I'll still end up right around the field. That's approaching where I would cap it. I don't know that I would want to extend beyond that if it gets even any higher, but at that number, I think it's kind of mandatory.
Yeah, it's and once again, there are some other options to get to. I'm still going to be really heavy on Zach Wheeler just because I feel such a lack of confidence overall in some of these other pitchers. Like, yeah, I want to get over the weight to the field on Walker Buehler, but that's relative to him being 0.5% owned. It's not like I'm going to go play 30% of Walker Buehler or anything like that. But then also, let's talk about Chris Sale, because what do we make of him where he's coming off a really weird start? He was just not able to generate strikeouts, was not able to generate swing and misses. And his strikeout stuff for the year relative to a normal pitcher is very good, right? He's still somebody who's throwing hard. His strikeout rate is, it would be easier for me to find him. My computer wasn't frozen right now, but that's besides the point. Chris Sale is still one of the elite strikeout pitchers in baseball, but it's not the same numbers that it was from a couple of years ago. And I don't know exactly what to make it from a standpoint of, is he a lesser pitcher because he dealt with injuries? Is it just rust because he hasn't pitched that much? But, a 24.6% strikeout rate, we'd be looking at that kind of number and being like, that's, really solid for most pitchers. But the last couple of years, we saw Chris Sale 35.6% strikeout rate, 38.4, 36.2. So what is the upside of Chris Sale in this spot against the Mets, where he's been a little bit less effective this year for starters? And then number two, also, he's not working as deep into the games.
Yeah, I am really concerned about how much depth we get from Chris Sale here. I think they're managing him. They're not set for the playoffs, but they've got a really good shot at the AL wildcard, and they kind of know it. So the way that I was putting it is they're trying to manage and set up for their playoff stretch while also managing Chris Sale's injury problems, his issues with some decreased velocity in that last start, and while also just not overworking him for the entire season, rushing him back. They want him healthy in the playoffs. So there was a little debate about whether he was even going to make this start to begin with. But now that we know that he is, I'm just pulling up his on StatCast, trying to get to the velocity. I meant to check it before we came on the show, and it had dipped in that last start. He had a really short outing. He had gone. Let me get there. He had gone 5 and a third, 6, and then fell to 3-2, but still facing 23 hitters. Only gave up. That was a clunky outing. He had 10 hits. The last start, he only faced 17 hitters in 5 innings. So he had a bad start. Then he had a start where his velocity was down, and they yanked him after 5 innings, only facing 17 hitters. And like you mentioned, he had only struck out one of them. So with the velo down, I think there's real concern that they only give him a max of 5 innings here. And if he's not going to be the effective, I can still strike out 10 guys in 5 innings version of Chris Sale, I just don't know how much I need to get to him here. He's expensive. He's not really priced down. Mets lineup is largely average at best, underperforming for the most part through the season, but there are some talented hitters in there. The other thing about Chris Sale the last 2 years is that his home runs have been up. So home runs get mixed up in a lot of happenstance, but that is still a concern. So I'm getting a little bit of home run mark on the Mets. So for Sale, 2019, 1.47 home run per 9, 2021, 1.50 so far. So I get a little bit of concern about that. I get a little concern about just the depth that he's going to go to and whether we're getting the apex version of Chris Sale or just, the 24% strikeout version. If it's the 24% guy, I don't want any part of it.
Yeah. And the other thing too with Chris Sale is if he was unowned, I would feel differently about it. But on DraftKings, he's projected for 16.6% ownership, even with the ownership going up on Zach Wheeler. On FanDuel, it's still a low mark on Chris Sale at 3.6%. But I also think in general, the way that Chris Sale is being utilized right now, he's a lesser fantasy option on just a points basis than he is on DK, because it seems fairly unlikely you're getting the quality start bonus out of him, given the way that the Red Sox have managed his pitches and innings so far. So Chris Sale, I hate to say it because I've been overweight to him on a bunch of slates lately, but this isn't going to be one of the Chris Sale slates for me. It's kind of a thing where you never want to be behind the 8 ball on going ahead with how you're getting exposure to players. But this is one where I kind of need to see him do it before I start playing with this kind of ownership and price tag. As of now, I'd actually rather be on the Mets side of the game than Chris Sale himself.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm actually getting a little bit of Mets given the power marks that I'm getting in my model here. So I agree. I'd rather be there. And if we were seeing Chris Sale come out, pitch 6 innings, strike out 8-9 guys every time, we'd be having a very different conversation. It's just not the nature of the spot. I know everybody wants to see him get back to that, but I don't think we're there. And I'm concerned if that velo stays down. I'm really concerned coming into today.
Yeah. And it's also, it's just with Chris Sale, like I said, the results haven't been there and it's starting to get a little concerning. You also got a guy who's 32 years old. The last time he had pitched before this year, you have to go all the way back to 2019. It's not a lot of reps there. So let's see what happens with him going forward. But let's talk about some of the chalk pitchers now on the lower end list. Is there anybody else as a pay-up option you want to bring up here?
Take a quick look back to the board. I was just trying to get some lineups updated. No, I think pretty much everybody kind of falls into the same pricing bucket in that 8,000s range, that 8s and maybe high 7s. So it's probably on to the next group here, I think.
All right, so let's talk about just the chalk of the slate in terms of value. We've got Joe Ryan over on FanDuel, 7,700, 23.7% projected ownership. On DraftKings, 41.8% projected ownership right now for Joe Ryan. It's not like he comes at a crazy cheap price tag. It's definitely on the value side, but it's not like this is a 6,500 or 6,700 pitcher. You know, if you're playing cash games, I think it's pretty easy. The cash combination on DK is Zach Wheeler and Joe Ryan. On FanDuel, you're going with Zach Wheeler. But in tournaments, this is a very concerning kind of ownership for me. And I get that he's a really good prospect and he has really good strikeout stuff. It's a very favorable matchup against the Cubs. I just don't want to go here quite to this number the field's at. I'm right now around half the field. But how are you handling it, Terry?
Yeah, very much the same way. I'll take half the fields on the FanDuel slate to maybe even less, 10-ish%, little under. I'm interested in the kid, but not at that ownership. I think the price is great, 7,700. He's done well at the major league level over 17 innings, 23 and a third strikeout rate, only a 3.3% walk rate, which I really like to see. But he's got a 4.68 xFIP in those starts. He's allowed an 11.4% barrel rate. He's been very, very good with hard hit within that, 27.3% hard hit. Those two things don't really jibe. So it depends on which side of that is the true version of Joe Ryan. I'm betting it's on the barrel side. So I'm concerned about the contact profile to a degree. 25.8 degree average launch angle certainly plays into some of the limited home run power that these Cubs have. Frank Schwindel, Patrick Wisdom, Ian Happ, a little bit interesting to me on the hitter side of things. I want to undercut the field dramatically on Joe Ryan. I think this is probably a major inflection point for this slate. And I don't think the Cubbies need to blow him up to make him just an ineffective start in this spot, particularly if a guy like Buehler comes out and gains ground with nobody on him, some of these other starters with just much less weight on them. It's easy enough for, a 3-4 run opportunity. He doesn't rack up as many strikeouts as we think. He pitches a shorter game. All of a sudden, 40% of the field is trailing there. So I actually am not interested in the Cubs bats, but I think I would grab a few shares of them and dramatically undercut the field on Joe Ryan.
Yeah, and once again, it's like what's the cutoff in terms of ownership where we start to really look at Joe Ryan as a good play relative to what the field's getting at him. And here's where we have him in our top pitcher story now. Over on FanDuel, I mentioned 23.7% ownership share. He's projected to be at the top pitcher on the slate 8.5% of the time. Over on DraftKings, 41.8% ownership, top value pitcher, top two value pitcher, 20% of the time, top two pitcher, 24.6. Realistically, this is a guy who should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25% owned, not quite the 40% number. So once again, I think looking a little bit elsewhere for value would make sense. But then the question becomes which guys for value, and maybe this is more of a DraftKings specific question, Terry, because FanDuel, you just pay up for pitching. But DraftKings, we're going to have to roster two pitchers. If you are going cheap as an SP2 and you are looking to fade Joe Ryan, who would you be going with in his place?
Let me jump back to the board there. So I think we definitely have interesting options, right? I mean, Corey Kluber, not a terrible option going up against the god-awful Texas Rangers lineup. He's coming in a little bit over-owned, but it's not to the degree that Ryan is just in the overall ownership total. So depending on what you're doing with the rest of your lineup, you can certainly roster Kluber here. I think similarly about Ian Anderson pitching for the Braves against Arizona, similar salary. He's $8,000, and he's drawing only a touch more ownership than his probability of being a top two. They're both similar-ish probabilities of being a top two also compared to Joe Ryan. He's to give it away, he's in an 8.5 probability, and those guys are in the 5s. So it's not, and trending towards 6, I should say. So it's not like we're talking about major differences in the profile of those guys. You can throw Cole Irvin into that mix. He's another guy that ranks out well on our board, and he pulls in positive leverage in that start against Seattle. So a little bit interesting there. Some of the other guys I trust a little bit less. Like I'd be more inclined to skip over Merrill Kelly and Taiwan Walker and maybe jump down to some oddball shares of Herman Marquez just for his quality at Coors Field, his ability to pitch there. I just hate that he's doing it against the Dodgers. Against many other opponents, this would be a spot where I'd be jumping on Herman Marquez. But I think at 0.5 ownership and a 3.8 probability of being one of the top two, he makes some sense to mix into some shares. He's a little bit more expensive than these other guys. After that, this falls apart completely for me. I'm not really interested in anybody toward the bottom of the board here. Is there anybody that you're seeing in that like 6,000, 5,000 range that you have any interest in on DK?
Oh, man, it's tough. It would be, what was the price range you gave me? 6,000 to 8,000?
Yeah, well, call it 6 to 8. That works.
Not quite 6 to 8. If you let me go a little cheaper, Cole Irvin, who it has a favorable enough matchup against the Mariners, and he's really cheap. He's projected for a little bit of ownership at 13.7. I know I cheated here. I didn't answer your question. You said 6 to 8,
cool.
and I just said, here's somebody outside the range of that prices. But, we do have Cole Irvin, even if his odds of being a top scoring pitcher aren't that great. We do have him with a 20.1% chance of being a top 2 value pitcher on the slate. And that's still a number that's comparable to Joe Ryan, and also something to consider is, let's say you're paying for bats in the Coors Field lineup and you need a save salary at pitcher. There's a chance that Coors Field goes off. And if the Dodgers, say, score enough runs, or maybe the Rockies score enough runs to where you need to have the Coors Field game in your lineup, then there's a good chance you're going to need an SP2 in there who's cheap on DK. And that's kind of where I think Cole Irvin comes into play. He's only 5,800. I don't think his odds of upside are really high, but the reason I'm playing him is not for him individually. It's the bats that I could get to by playing him. Cole Irvin, once again, not a significant upside pitcher, but I like the matchup against Seattle, home, so favorable park. And once again, 5,800 price tag. I think he's a safe play, and I kind of like getting to him a little bit on the value side. Do you have any feelings about Cole Irvin?
Yeah, he was in the mix as I was kind of just running through them, looking at the board. I definitely hit on him. What stood out to me was, the value is extreme, and he's got positive leverage there. So you're making a smart decision regardless of how he pitches, basically. What concerns me about Irvin is I think the same thing that would for you. And like you said, he's not a big upside play. 15.9% strikeout rate over 164 and a third innings this season is not very good for the Southpaw. 4.80 xFIP, same story there. Puts too many guys on base. But going up against the Seattle lineup that might give them a few bonus strikeouts, 25.1% rate for them in the split, create runs 8% worse than average against lefties, 158 ISO, 3.80% home run rate. So yeah, as far as safe, relatively inexpensive options, I think he could definitely give you what you need for an SP2 there. Looking down that value board though, I have no interest in Vince Velasquez against the Giants. I have no interest in Jameson Junk. Taiwan Walker against the Red Sox. There's not much after that. After you drop off 8,000, I think it just falls off a cliff.
I think I was like 6 or 7 years old when Scott Kazmir was being hyped as a prospect in the Mets organization. Somehow he's stuck around. He was pitching in the Independent League. I think he was pitching like down the street from me at the Somerset Patriots Stadium, like at a point in time not too long ago. And now all of a sudden he finds himself not just at the big league level, but in a fairly high leverage game for the San Francisco Giants, who only have a 1-game lead over the Dodgers in the NL West. And also with those games, one of the reasons that division race is really crazy, the team that loses has to play in that play-in game in the wild card spot. So these are very high leverage spots that Scott Kazmir all of a sudden finds himself thrust into. But yeah, these are bad options. Taylor Hearn, Chris Flexen, Miles Michaelis, Keegan Aiken, Scott Kazmir, Jansen Junk, Brett Anderson. I don't want anything to do with any of these guys. So to me, we didn't really spend that much time talking about Ian Anderson. I think he's going a little bit overlooked, only 11.7% projected ownership over on DK. On FanDuel, Anderson at 8,000 projected for 7.9% ownership. He's had some struggles in the second half of the year, but all in all, he's still a very quality pitcher. Maybe he's wearing down a little bit here, but I like the matchup against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Fairly low ownership. I like the salary savings he offers. And then something else I'm going to bring up about Ian Anderson. In our player props tool over on Awesemo.com, which is free to use, Ian Anderson, over 4.5 strikeouts. That is plus 120. That is one of our best plays of the night today in terms of player props. So I'll ask you, do you have any further thoughts on Ian Anderson? And then we can discuss that prop a little bit.
Yeah, I like the spot for Ian Anderson. He was in that mix that I ran through a little bit too quickly there. And I agree. He's going a little bit under-owned definitely for me on the FanDuel slate at 8,000. I think he's better than that. He projects better than that for me on my board. Overall, he is my 4th or 5th top projected pitcher on the FanDuel slate. So I definitely like the spot. He's pitched fairly well, like you said, 23.4% strikeout rate over 115 and a third. He allows a little bit of contact, 10.2% barrel rate, 40.1% hard hit, 88.4 mile an hour average exit velo, though. That's a little bit weird. You normally see a much higher average exit velocity with that combination, and it's at a 5.7 degree average launch angle. So a lot of it is kept down, kept in the ballpark. 10% walk rate is a little bit concerning as well. So too many guys on base. But going up against this Arizona lineup on this particular slate for that price, I think it makes a ton of sense. Arizona against righties, creating runs 21% worse than average, a 2.25% home run rate, a 134 team ISO, and they strike out 24.6% of the time. Sign me up. We should definitely be over the field on Ian Anderson here.
Yeah, and then I want to go to Ian Anderson's game log really quickly because if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure a lot of the matchups he struggled in, they were brutally difficult matchups. And it's kind of hard to really look at some of those spots and be like, oh, look, Ian Anderson didn't pitch great in Coors Field. I don't know. That's massively concerning. Here's some of his recent starts in San Francisco against the Giants. Oh, that's a very difficult matchup. At home against Miami, he destroyed Miami, pitched 5 innings, struck out 9 batters. So that was a great outing for him. Then he pitches in Coors Field. All right, that's a bad start. At home against the Giants, that's another tough spot. Then before then, you have to go all the way back to a start in July where he pitched poorly against Miami, except he was also pitching hurt that start. And we end up finding out after the fact that, he has to miss a bunch of time. He ended up pitching 5 2/3 scoreless innings, no strikeouts, but that was the start against the Giants, first coming off the injured list. But, before that, the start he struggled against the Marlins. He was hurt that game. He goes on the injured list after. So I'm not too concerned by some of his recent outings, and I'm more encouraged by the fact that the one good spot we saw him in, 5 innings, 9 strikeouts, 2 runs. So not that those are the kind of expectations we should have, but I think he is definitely getting slept on a little bit here. Any other pitchers here that you want to bring up? A lot of the options that I think are relevant we kind of covered.
Let's see. We talked about Luis Garcia a little bit. We talked about Buehler. Kyle Hendricks is kind of weird on our board, and he's kind of in that similar spot on my projections. Are you getting any Kyle Hendricks against that loaded Twins lineup? And when I say loaded, I mean they're kind of bad, but they do have a lot of power hitters in there. Soft tosser going up against that with a lot of strikes. I don't know about that spot. That one concerns me, but there's value there at 7,800 on the FanDuel slate. There's value there certainly at 7,500 on the DK slate. He's getting over-owned for it. Is that a spot for you? Because it's not really for me. It's not one I was really going to.
No, I very, very seldomly play Kyle Hendricks. It's certainly not when he's popular. And the other thing to consider, too, is his numbers have really sucked this year. And at the beginning of the year, he had a good ERA. He was winning a bunch of games, so his peripheral numbers were terrible. And I had an extended back and forth with somebody in our Slack chat who was telling me that I was underrating Kyle Hendricks and he just should be outperforming his peripheral stats. They caught up to him, though. He's a 4.81 ERA, 4.91 expected ERA, 4.91 FIP. That's all even across the board. He doesn't generate any strikeouts. And here's the big issue with Kyle Hendricks this year as opposed to the last few years where he'd been really successful. He's walking guys now. And when you consider that his inability to strike guys out and then he's giving guys free passes, it's an issue. Last year, he had a 2.5% walk rate. That really helps limit the damage. But then when he's walking, nearly 3 times as many hitters, it's an issue for Kyle Hendricks. And that also that as bad as his strikeout rate was in the past, it's gone even lower this year. Last couple of years, 20.5%, 20.3%. This year, all the way down to 16.6%. So a guy who doesn't generate a lot of strikeouts is seeing even less strikeouts. A guy also who is very reliant on his control, starting to walk more hitters. There's a lot of stuff here that suggests that Kyle Hendricks at age 31 might not be aging that well. A guy who only has an average fastball velocity of 87 miles per hour. So to me, I'm going to be looking elsewhere.
Yeah, I totally agree with every point you made in there. The strikeouts aren't enough. With inflated walks, putting more guys on where we talk about his walk rate plus some barrels. He doesn't have a crazy hard hit by any means, 32.6% hard hit. So, soft tosser going in, sometimes yield soft contact coming back out. But the Twins on the other side of this game as well, several of those power hitters in the middle of the lineup and some of like a Miguel Sano, for example, for all his lack of quality and swing and miss, 34.8% strikeout rate is massive. He does know how to draw a walk, 10.9% walk rate. That's very good. He's also got a 54.9% hard hit percentage and an 18.2% barrel rate. The guy's going 222, 307, 473 for the year, but he's hit 29 home runs. You're just throwing Kyle Hendricks into kind of a buzzsaw here. So with that much of the field on him too, 21% on DK, 13% on FanDuel, that's just a clean pass for me. I'm going to take him off the board entirely, I think.
Yeah, and I see some people in the YouTube chat bringing up the weather situation there. We've got EDC 102C. There's a lot of numbers. But he's bringing up the wind, which is a viable point. There's a lot of wind blowing in at Chicago today, Wrigley. I think that's going to certainly cap the upside of the offenses, but I don't think that means Kyle Hendricks goes out and starts striking guys out to deliver on fantasy upside either. So Kyle Hendricks, I guess he's a relatively safe play because of the weather conditions, but there's not enough upside for me to play him in tournaments. I'm just going to hope that it's, anybody else that ends up scoring. I'd rather play Ian Anderson at a similar price point for, less than half the ownership.
100 out of 100 times. Absolutely. What kind of a tailwind would Kyle Hendricks need to have his fastball velocity increase to like 92 miles an hour even? It would be ridiculous.
Yeah, he would need like 150 mile per hour winds behind him. Then he'd be throwing 93, and then people would still probably be hitting him. But
it would be advantageous to the hitters. Yeah. Yeah, not a spot for him.
I'm kind of curious to look at what his strikeouts prop is. Sportsbook 3.5 is the over/under for Kyle Hendricks strikeouts. That is a pretty weak number. Now, I'm going to throw one more bet that our model likes quite a bit, and then we can move over to the stacks. Luis Garcia over/under 5.5 strikeouts. We have the over hitting 76% of the time here. That seems like a pretty low number for Luis Garcia. Pitcher has been quality this year, and he's going up against that Angels lineup. There's a lot of strikeouts to be had there. So I'm curious, where do you stand on Luis Garcia strikeouts for today?
That's a tighter line than I expected it to be, but I've got him going over. I've got him at 6.24 in the way my model does it. So call it the over 6 and change. So I like it, but closer than I thought.
All right. So let's move over to the offenses then. But first, guys, today's show is sponsored by Jock Market. If you guys are not familiar with Jock Market, head to your app store, download the Jock Market app. This is a different way to play daily fantasy sports. There's no kind of salaries you have to worry about. You don't have to worry about correlation, ownership, lineup construction, none of that. This is a stock market, but for athletes. So you bid on players, you get shares of them in the IPO period. Then as the game starts, you could buy and sell players like their stocks. You could buy low on guys who are off to a bad start, think you're going to turn it around. You could sell high on somebody, maybe it's a home run quick, and you think that he's going to struggle in his next couple of bats. So lots of different ways to play and have fun at Jock Market. But the way you want to deposit your money is using the promo code Awesemo, because that will get you a $50 bonus on your first deposit. That is promo code Awesemo over at Jock Market. So let's head on over to these stocks, to these stacks, Terry. And let me give these ownership a little refresh to make sure I'm looking at the most recent data. And it should be a surprise to nobody that the overall top projected scoring team on the slate is the Los Angeles Dodgers. Over on FanDuel, 18% chance to be a top scoring team of the slate. 15.3% ownership share. Over on DraftKings, we have the Dodgers a little more appropriately owned, 18% ownership share, 18% chance to be a top stack. Once again, though, with the Dodgers here, I'm not too concerned about the ownership of a team when they also have comparable odds of being a top stack. Even if they are going to be the most or one of the most popular stacks, I think it's important to get the Dodgers in because they're in Coors Field. And, the matchup against German Marquez isn't the best in the world, but it's Colorado. It's the Dodgers. There's upside here. Are you seeing it any differently?
I'm not seeing it differently in terms of it's Colorado, it's the Dodgers. It makes sense. Just play them. What I will say is definitely what I mentioned about German Marquez before. This guy knows how to pitch in this ballpark and has demonstrably done it throughout his career. So it's not your usual Coors Field matchup. It's still a Coors Field game. There's still major upside in getting one of the best lineups in baseball, top to bottom. It's an all-star team when they're playing in this park. I don't care who's on the mound, but you can throw in the wrinkles that Marquez, even this season, demonstrably better in even ERA, 5.38 ERA in 77 road innings, 3.16 ERA in 94 innings at Coors this season, 23.8% strikeout rate at home, 23.4 on the road, walks more hitters at home. He's a 9.9% walk rate at home, 7.2% on the road, but a 3.51 xFIP at home, 3.72 on the road, 3.50 FIP and a 4.13 FIP home and road. So he's been better this year at home than he has on the road. Over the course of his career, he's been a little bit better at home as well. 3.41 xFIP over the course of his career. He's got an ERA that's higher at home over the course of his career, but the underlying stuff gives him a little bit of upside at home. So again, don't love to talk about home road splits, but for Coors Field stuff, I think it is a little bit telling. 24.4% strikeout rate at home over the course of his career, 23.2% on the road. The walks do tick up, but only 7.1% compared to 6.5 in the career numbers. So dude is very good at pitching at this ballpark. He knows what he's doing, and he's a good pitcher in a vacuum. So it's not your typical Coors Field start. That's the one note of hesitance that I would have on going way, way over the field on the Dodgers. Like people might have been a little bit more in against other opposing pitchers here. That said, fire away. Makes all the sense in the world. Just focus on some of the lower owned guys. You've got Gavin Lux fairly low owned. Justin Turner on the DK slate is definitely too low owned. Similar story with Max Muncy in the middle of the lineup. FanDuel, those guys both jump in popularity because they're underpriced. They're fairly priced on DK. So there's better ways to put them together on the DK slate, which kind of jives with what you said about the top stacks tool.
Yeah, and guys, Gavin Lux, Luke Raley. There are a lot of expensive hitters in this lineup. One of them, Corey Seager, just not appropriately priced on DraftKings. But Lux and Raley, both cheap on FanDuel and DraftKings. That's a reasonable way to save salary. Also reduce the ownership of a Dodger stack a little bit. And also, if you want to make a really contrarian Dodger stack on DK today, make a 5-man stack that doesn't include Corey Seager. This is a lineup from top to bottom. There's a lot of firepower in it. And even the guys at the bottom of the order, even if Luke Riley, is he going to be a great big league hitter? Probably not, but it's Coors Field. We've seen, David Dahl was a fantasy superstar just because he played for the Rockies for a little bit in Colorado. So with this being a Coors Field game, Luke Riley, I think that, getting to him overweight to the field, that's sensible. That's something I have right now. But yeah, if you make a Dodger stack that does not have Corey Seager, that's going to be a pretty contrarian looking Los Angeles lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that price is super attractive, so it makes sense that everybody's going there. But like you said, even if you leave him out of the lineup, it's not like one of these lineups where you're going to, let's say, the Padres and leaving Tatis out. You've got an all-star team to still choose from up and down this lineup. Maybe not Luke Riley. Maybe he gets there one day. Who knows? But even Gavin Lux is proven that he's able to hit and contribute in a fantasy sense. So yeah, 1 through 7, 1 through 8, these guys are very, very playable. They just come with that slight warning about the opposing pitcher being pretty good.
All right, now let's talk about the Yankees and all the ownership that's going to this team, because it's a significant amount. Over on FanDuel, 11.1% projected ownership compared to a 7.4% chance to be a top stack. Over on DK, they're actually picking up comparable ownership to the Dodgers today. We have 17.8% ownership going to the Yankees compared to 18.1% for the Dodgers. So if I'm paying up for a contrarian, for a popular offense, I'm going to the Dodgers here over a team like the Yankees, because we have the Yankees versus the Dodgers, same projected ownership. However, 7% top stack odds for the Yankees compared to 18% for the Dodgers. I just think I look at those numbers and I think the Dodgers warranted ownership, the Yankees less so.
Yeah, I can get behind that. I mean, particularly when you see the massive negative leverage number on the DK slate for the Yankees, it just makes sense to go to the higher ranked team that's playing at Coors Field with less overall, less negative leverage and only slightly more overall ownership in the aggregate. The Yanks, I think, look very strong here in terms of their home run upside, in terms of their ability to produce against this guy. Taylor Hearn on the season, 21.9% strikeout rate, a 4.65 xFIP, 8.1% barrel rate, 38.7% hard hit at a 15.6 degree average launch angle. Those aren't atrocious contact numbers, but he's going to be putting guys on base, 9.3% walk rate, 1.31 whip. Most likely, this is not going to be a good spot for Taylor Hearn. He's not going to have a nice night. It's also been humid and just nasty here all day, so it's kind of favorable-ish hitting conditions at Yankee Stadium for September. So I expect an offensive-laden night here. Even Corey Kluber going up against this weak lineup, I'm a little bit concerned about just based on the Yankee Stadium conditions. A little bit different than what we normally get in September around here. So don't love it, but definitely, yeah, if you can get to the Yankees in unique combinations, and I think there's a few hitters that help you do it. Joey Gallo, for instance, 8.1% ownership, way too low. Don't care about lefty-lefty with Joey Gallo, particularly not against a lefty like this. He's similarly under-owned on the FanDuel slate. On the FanDuel slate, you also can add Giancarlo Stanton to that list. You can add Gleyber Torres to that list. So they're a little bit easier to put together. DJ LeMahieu up top, single-digit ownership as well. Just heavy concentration of ownership around Luke Voit, who's overrated, and a little bit around Aaron Judge. Otherwise, and then I guess at the back end of the lineup on Gio Urshela and Kyle Higashioka, you guys can have them if I can have Giancarlo Stanton, Joey Gallo, Gleyber Torres, and DJ LeMahieu. I'll take that if everybody else wants to roster Gio Urshela, Kyle Higashioka, and then, obviously it swings on Aaron Judge in that equation, but I'll take the middle of the lineup. I'm happy to do that. So I think there are spots with the Yankees, but maybe it's a 3-man, maybe it's your secondary stack as opposed to your primary.
All right, now let's get to, those are some of the more popular offenses on the slate. Let's get to a team that's contrarian that I actually really like quite a bit today. And that's the San Francisco Giants. This offense has been extremely good this year. I thought for the longest time they're going to regress. The season is almost the end. They haven't regressed at this point. They have a 1-game lead over the Dodgers in the AL West. And, this matchup against Vince Velasquez, this is a weird pitching matchup to have such a high leverage spot. But Scott Kazmir against Vince Velasquez, the pitching options. Vince Velasquez this year, there's a little bit of strikeout ability, but still 6.09 ERA, 5.08 expected ERA, 5.68 FIP. Then you also look at the contact numbers, getting hit really hard, 17.8% home run to fly ball rate, and he gives up a ton of fly balls. Terrible combination. A guy who only has a 32.9% ground ball rate and the balls hit in the air are leaving the park nearly a fifth of the time. So I think this is a really high upside spot for the Giants, and picking up no ownership, sub 1% on DK, 3% as a team over on FanDuel. The most popular hitter in the the Giants lineup today on DraftKings, Evan Longoria, 1.2% ownership. This team is going massively overlooked, and I really like the spot for them against Velasquez.
Yeah, they were similar yesterday too. Everybody's just reluctant to get to these guys for kind of unknown reasons. I don't really understand where the field is on this, but I'm happy to get there when other people aren't. Just to put them in perspective against right-handed pitching, 205 collective ISO, creating runs 12% better than average, 4.56% home run rate, one of the best marks in the league. Why wouldn't we want to get to these guys, gang? Yeah, absolutely. Fire away against Vince Velasquez. I referred to this in my article as the pitching matchup that time forgot. Vince Velasquez is only 29 years old, but seems like he's been around forever. And a guy that we've kind of just been like, all right, super talented, has strikeout stuff. When's it going to come together? At 29, I think we can stop waiting. I think he's just is who he is. Dude with an 11.9% walk rate, an 11.3% barrel rate, 42.3% hard hit, 90.5 mile an hour average exit velo at a 20.1 degree average launch angle. That's definitely attackable. I like both sides of this game offensively, to be honest. I wrote up I had to choose, and I wrote up the Giants yesterday, so I picked the Padres to write up today, but I think both sides of this look spectacular. Scott Kazmir peaked in 2006 as a pitcher, had not pitched in the majors since 2016, pitched earlier this year, took a break to go pitch mediocre innings in the Olympics, made 6 starts in the minors, so he is stretched out to the 5-6 inning range. I think they chase him after an inning or 2. I see major power upside for the Padres here as well. So both sides of this one, figure out unique ways to stack the Padres, fire away with any of the Giants bats. They're all under-owned, and they're a very good lineup top to bottom as well. That team plays very well 1 through 8, so you can put them together in any combination you need to.
And by the way, related to this game and team we just talked about, Nick the Picker, he's saying, not DFS related, but can you talk me out of the Giants team total over 4.5 runs? I'm about to bet irresponsibly. I can't talk you out of the Giants for any reason. For DFS, for betting, I think this is a team that in this spot is just getting a little bit overlooked. Vince Velasquez has not pitched well whatsoever this year. And another thing to consider about Velasquez, a handful of those innings he pitched were out of the bullpen, and he's stuck coming out of the pen, and it's easier to pitch as a reliever than a starter. So I don't understand what made this is how, I mean, I get the Padres have dealt with a lot of pitching injuries, but I mean, you're down bad if you're turning to Jake Arrieta and Vince Velasquez in the thick of a playoff race, which is what the Padres have resorted to towards the end of the season here. So, I mean, Vince Velasquez, who also keep in mind, the Padres went to Jake Arrieta before they got to Vince Velasquez. And think how bad Arrieta's been here. This was the backup plan to Arrieta. So I have no issues whatsoever picking on Velasquez for betting purposes or for DFS. But what are some other offenses you're looking at for lower owned spots, Terry?
Let me jump back over there. I was trying to sneak my moving my crunch over to my filtering tool there. And while you were talking, let's see, under-owned. On the FanDuel slate, it looks like I'm going to be getting to, let's see, we talked about the Giants. Looks like I'm going to be getting to a fair amount of Cardinals. They project relatively well, upper middle part of the board and going under-owned. It's a team that I've talked about a few different times recently as far as their general underperformance, but there's definitely bats that I still like getting to. I have no worries about throwing bats at a pitcher like Brett Anderson. So I think there's definitely upside for the Cardinals, probably going a little bit underappreciated. Everybody in the lineup on the FanDuel slate below 5% ownership. Everybody on DK below 6% ownership. All fairly priced. Not a $5,000 hitter in the lineup on DK. Only one $4,000 hitter in the lineup on FanDuel. And those hitters include Paul Goldschmidt, Tyler O'Neill, Nolan Arenado, and then we get the odds and ends around it. Tommy Edman, a decent hit tool, a speed guy. You get Dylan Carlson in there. If you need a catcher with who's probably approaching somewhere around my age, Yadi Molina's in the lineup again. Edmundo Sosa, a little bit of underrated upside in the middle of the infield. Harrison Bader. It plays 1 through 8. It's not the greatest quality on the back end, but certainly 1 through 5, you get pretty top end quality here. So I don't mind going to the Cards a little bit over the field.
Yeah, and by the way, we've got Emac throwing in the chat. I'm going to give out a contrarian one also, but I wanted to bring up that Emac says Vince Velasquez and Kazmir faced off in the rookie season the year after Randy Johnson threw a no-hitter. That's crazy. Like Emac was like only 40 at that point or something. That's how long that was a minute ago. But yeah, these are pitchers who probably don't deserve to be on MLB rosters. But there's kind of this thing that happens in really all sports where teams just kind of continually to fall back on these veterans because they've been in the league for so long. Like Matt Harvey. Like, why the hell is that guy still been getting chances in the big leagues? There's no reason that should be the case, but he's probably going to wind up in somebody else's team than somebody else's rotation next year. But I want to bring up the New York Mets because we talked about Chris Sale and not feeling comfortable about him earlier, and people aren't rostering the Mets either. So at pitcher, people are getting the Sale a little bit. Not that he's crazy popular, but he's a little more popular than I would like to roster him individually. But we've got the Mets today picking up 1.6% ownership on DraftKings. They're sub 1% on FanDuel. That's a massive contrarian spot for a pitcher in Chris Sale, who while he's been good this year, he hasn't been great. He hasn't been the Chris Sale of old. And I still think it's worth kind of picking on him a little bit. He's getting hit fairly hard, 20% home run to fly ball rate for Chris Sale. By the way, the last year we saw Chris Sale pitch was a while ago, a couple injuries ago, 2019. He had a 19.5% home run to fly ball rate this year, that year. And it was something you mentioned before, Terry, that you're a little concerned about the home runs for him. I don't think the Mets are the team that's most likely to be the top scoring team on the slate, but they want to be in more than 1% of lineup. So if I'm taking a stand on a massive contrarian team, I'm going to be going to the Mets here against Chris Sale, because I'm not sure where Chris Sale's at as a pitcher right now.
I like that call, and I tell you what, so does my model. I just ran it all through the filtering process, and they came up with my second highest on stack. I actually have to push it down a little bit because I'm not getting to enough shares of some of the other teams that I like. But I think that's a good spot. I mentioned they were profiling decently well in my home run model, which is something that I always look at. I like to look at the sequential hitting opportunities, particularly on FanDuel, where, some of the run scoring and the hitting just kind of counts similarly to home runs. But you get that from this team. Again, I know they've underperformed through the season, but you get a lot of quality hitters in Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, ton of power, Francisco Lindor, quality hit tool and power for years and years and years, despite what he's done this season. Javi Baez, ton of power. JD Davis, decent stick, a little bit of power. Jonathan Villar, ton of speed, a little bit of power. Jeff McNeil, nice hit tool. Kevin Pillar and James McMahon, we don't really need to discuss on the back end. What I really like on the FanDuel slate in particular, you get hitters 4 through 7. So Baez, Davis, VR, and McNeil, all of those guys, multi-position eligibility, all of those guys relatively underpriced. VR in there with triple position eligibility. You can combine these guys all over the board in different ways with different substacks and different other teams to bring into the mix. I really like how they help things come together. They're not expensive. They've got decent upside. Cue the Chris Sale, 12 strikeout, 6-inning shutout. But I like the spot. I really do.
All right. If you guys have any questions, throw those into the YouTube chat. Terry and I are going to be answering those in a sec. But also, Terry, we're gonna get some home run picks. So I'm gonna do a read here. Prepare your home run pick. We're gonna get to that. They'll hit everybody's questions. So hit me up in Slack. Hit me up in YouTube. Also, do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've got PGA Live Before Lock coming up right after this. If you guys want access to all the tools that we have over on Awesemo.com, you can sign up for an Awesemo Plus package. That is only for $29.95 for a weekly pass. Really good way to just dip your toes in the water, see what we have over at Awesemo.com with a weekly pass, and see if that's something you might be interested in for the long haul. And also, if you're new signing up, use the promo code MLB Live Before Lock. That's all one word, all capital letters, MLB Live Before Lock. That'll get you 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And if you're just looking to play MLB down the stretch of the season, you don't play other DFS sports, we've got you covered there too. An MLB Plus package that is $4.95 for a weekly pass. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. So, all right, Terry, let's get to these home run picks. And who is rating highly in your home run model?
So I mentioned before that the Padres are going up against a pitcher who peaked in 2006. Don't think much of Scott Kazmir at the moment in the very, very small 7-inning sample over 2 starts and a relief appearance that we got at the beginning of the season. Kazmir actually pitched okay in terms of strikeout rate, 24.1% strikeout rate, only walked 3.4% of hitters. He also gave up a 14.3% barrel rate and 57.1% hard hit rate with 95.5 mile an hour average exit velo. That is a home run in a nutshell. The Padres are rocketing through the top of my board. I went with a pick that's a lower owned guy, single digits on both sites. I went with Will Myers, righty lefty here.
Okay, Will Myers. By the way, somebody in the YouTube chat, I can't remember who it was. I wanna give him here. If I just do somebody, here we go. NFL DFS, let's win the Millie Maker. Very detailed, but I hope he wins the Millie Maker with that name in YouTube. Earlier, he asked for our home run picks, but this was way early in the show. We're talking about pitching. His home run call was also Will Myers, but he went even bolder. He said Will Myers for 3 home runs. That's pretty bold call. But hey, I'm right on board with Terry. Terry's actually projecting, I think it was 4 home runs. Terry said so. I'll go Will Myers for 5 homers. But yeah, I like the spot for the Dodgers. I like the spot for the Padres. I think it's a game that's kind of getting slept on. The Padres are somewhat popular. There is no ownership going to the San Francisco Giants, and I'm going to make my home run call of the day. Brandon Belt, who is picking up sub 1% ownership today. He's having an outstanding season overall. And it's hard for me to not want to pick on Vince Velasquez. If you're to say who's the most homer-prone pitcher on the slate today, It's Velasquez. Velasquez, we mentioned, a very low ground ball rate, really high home run to fly ball rate. That's something that generally tends to lead to a lot of balls leaving the park. So I think everybody in that Giants lineup is more live to hit a home run than what the ownership shows. So I'm going with Brandon Belt there.
I really like that pick. Belt, as well as, all of his teammates on that Giant squad, just an underrated guy over time, but particularly this year, 357 plate appearances, has had trouble staying in the lineup. But in that small sample, 26 home runs, a 311 ISO. That rivals the best power hitters in the league. Fernando Tatis on the other side has a 330 ISO, just to put that in perspective, 39 home runs and 503 plate appearances. Belt is having a phenomenal year. I really like that call. And it looks like, I was just looking at my tournament strategy article, it looks like our hardworking team of editors who I like to keep on their toes took out my line about Fernando Tatis in this matchup, but I said that he actually has 12 home run upside in this spot earlier in the day when I wrote that. So I'll go the chat, super chatter, one better, 12 home runs tonight for Fernando Tatis. But they have to let Kazmir pitch the whole game to get there.
There was way back in the day, there was the MLB Statcast that had a glitch in it. I was at my friend Matt Meiselman's house, and Richie Sexson hit a home run. And for some reason, the MLB Gamecast said that he was 8 for 8 with 8 home runs. And we were going nuts. For whatever reason, we thought that was accurate information, that Richie Sexson, who, like, the game, by the way, was like 5-0 at the time. We thought he had 8 home runs somehow. But that aside, that was one of the... Well, yeah, how do you grow up to just be a nerd who sits on Twitter and YouTube and talks about sports? You get excited about MLB Statcast glitches when you're a kid, especially when it involves Richie Sexson. We got Josh plays DFS. His home run call, Patrick Wisdom. We've got Ryan Rennebaum, righty matchup. He's going with Buster Posey. Posey's been swinging. Yep, Posey. Crazy bounce back year for Buster Posey. And also one of the many Giants hitters I like for a contrarian lineup. I didn't see this kind of season coming for the Giants, but Posey in particular.
Yeah, I don't think anybody expected this kind of a renaissance from Posey. I mean, catchers, particularly late in their career, tend to wind down with the bat. And he has just been surging. 299, 386, 501 this season, 202 ISO, 18 home runs and 414 plate appearances. So he's another catcher that, plays almost every day, or he's at least out there a lot. 40% better than average by WRC plus creating runs, 40.1% hard hit rate. 20% strikeout rate is maybe a little up above where he might have been at one point in his career. I don't have it in front of me, but still walking 12.3% of the time. He's a spectacular hitter. First base eligibility on the FanDuel slate. Catcher still eligible on DK.
All right, we've got Butho Jenkins, Goldschmidt, or Walsh. I prefer the spot for Goldschmidt today. The spot for Walsh against Luis Garcia, a little sketchy to me. Not really somebody who I'm dying to get to, even though Jared Walsh always has upside as a one-off or run call, and for whatever reason, it was always like plus 500 a homer at sports books today. We've got Dope Heathen. I think that's I'm trying to figure out, because it's all one word. I'm trying to figure out where the space are supposed to be. But he's going Kyle Tucker as his home run pick. Michael Knack, Verdugo. We've got Jared Walsh in there. Trevor Story, Freddie Freeman, Andrew McCutchen, Kepler. Lots of home run calls coming up in the chat. And there was one other
good amount of crossover with my board too. I like it.
Hey, that's good. A lot of people must be reading Terry's article, which is great content over at awesemo.com. It's a free article to read, so no reason you guys shouldn't be clicking on it. Salvador Mundi is asking a little 2v2 here. Bogarts and Jared Walsh, or Schwarber and Gurriel. Are you opinionated on that, Terry?
Bogey and Jared. That might just come down to ownership. I don't have it all splayed out in front of me that way. Bogey and Jared. Everybody knows I love Gurriel. I'm going to take that side of it.
All right. So, guys, we have to sign off because we've got the PGA show that's starting up at 7 right after us. And you guys are going to want to stick around for that. So do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the channel, stick around, watch Eric and I assume Ben talk about a little PGA DFS. And other than that, good luck tonight, guys.